He took her hand for the child's sake, but stayed because his heart would not let go. The morning Samuel Whitaker agreed to marry the pregnant daughter of a town judge. He had mud on his boots, a bank letter in his pocket, and no room left in his life for one more person depending on him. Yet there she stood. Lydia Harrow waited beside her father at the edge of the yard, one gloved hand resting low against the front of her coat. She was not showing enough for strangers to stare openly yet, but enough for honest people to look away too quickly. Her chin stayed lifted, though Samuel saw how tightly she held herself, as if one careless word might break something she had spent weeks holding together. Judge Elias Harrow stood between them in his black Sunday coat, though it was only Thursday. His hat was in his hand, and his white hair had been combed with the care of a man trying to make a dreadful errand look respectable. Behind Samuel, the farmhouse door stood open. Warm air from the kitchen slipped out with the smell of coffee, bacon grease, and the biscuits Mrs. Vale had nearly burned because she had been watching the window instead of the stove. Somewhere near the barn, old Abram Pike had stopped pretending to mend a gate latch. Danny Bell, the 17-year-old hired boy Samuel had taken in after his mother died, hovered by the wagon shed with a curricomb in his hand and curiosity all over his face. Samuel wished none of them were watching. Judge Harrow looked at him with the steady eyes he used from the bench. "Mr. Whitaker, I will ask you one final time before my daughter hears your answer. Are you certain you understand what I am proposing?" Samuel did understand. That was the trouble. He understood that Lydia Harrow had been courted by a traveling school examiner named Russell Vane, a polished man with clean cuffs and city manners, who had promised to return after his appointment in Cheyenne. He understood that Vane's letters had stopped. Then the postmaster had quietly confirmed he had taken work somewhere east and left no forwarding address. He understood that a respectable woman carrying a child without a husband's name would be pitied in private, judged in public, and offered kindness only by people strong enough to withstand gossip. There were not many of those people in Mercy Ridge. Samuel also understood why Judge Harrow had come to him. Whitaker Farm sat 2 miles beyond town, spread across a low rise of wheat ground, pasture, and a narrow creek that ran shallow in dry years. It had once belonged to Samuel's father, then to Samuel after fever took both parents within the same winter. The place was respected, but respect did not pay notes. Last year Samuel had borrowed to buy a second reaper and seed more acreage after wheat prices climbed high enough to tempt better men than him. Then came rust in the south field, a hard spring freeze, and a market that fell before harvest. Now the bank wanted a payment by September, and the paper folded in Samuel's pocket had the weight of a stone. But he was not the only one who would lose if the farm failed. Mrs. Vale had kept the house since Samuel was 12 and had nowhere else to go but a married niece in Missouri who wrote only at Christmas. Abram Pike had ridden for Samuel's father before Samuel was born and walked with a limp from an old wagon accident. Danny Bell had grown 3 inches in a year and still looked half afraid every time anyone mentioned sending him on. Samuel could lose land, that would hurt. But losing the roof over their heads would shame him in a place too deep for speech. Judge Harrow had not offered to buy Samuel. He had been careful about that, almost painfully careful. He had come 2 nights earlier and spoken to Samuel alone in the granary, where the smell of wheat dust lay thick in the boards. "My daughter needs protection," the judge had said. "Not charity, not punishment, protection. I can arrange a small investment through her mother's estate, enough to help you carry your note if managed wisely. In return, she would have a husband's name and a household away from town windows." Samuel had looked at him then, hard. And what would she have in that household? The judge had lowered his eyes for the first time. "That depends on the man I ask." Now that man stood in the yard, with Lydia Harrow watching him as if she had already trained herself not to expect gentleness. Samuel took off his hat. The sky over the fields had the pale silver look that came before rain, though the ground still held dust along the fence line. A meadowlark called once from the cottonwood by the creek, then went silent. "I understand," Samuel said. Judge Harrow's fingers tightened around his hat brim. "And your answer?" Samuel looked at Lydia, not her father. She was not beautiful in the easy way men spoke of at socials. Her face was too serious for that, her mouth too guarded. But there was strength in her stillness. There was dignity in the way she did not shrink from his looking, though color rose in her cheeks. She had not come dressed like a bride. She wore a brown traveling dress, plain gloves, and a blue ribbon at her throat that looked like something chosen when she still believed the day might matter. "Miss Harrow," Samuel said, "your father and I have spoken, but I won't answer him unless I know you have heard the terms yourself." A small movement passed over her face, surprise maybe. "I heard them," she said. Her voice was low and steady, though not untouched by fear. "And you are willing?" Judge Harrow started to speak, but Lydia lifted one hand, stopping him without looking away from Samuel. "I am not willing because it is what I dreamed of," she said. "I am willing because my child will need more than whispers and closed doors. I am willing because my father believes you are honorable, and because I would rather enter a hard bargain honestly than be pitied by people who call pity kindness." The yard went so quiet Samuel heard Abram clear his throat by the barn. Samuel nodded once. He respected her more for saying it plainly. "Then I will marry you," he said. "But there will be rules in this house, and they begin with me. You'll have your own room, your own say over your days. I won't touch you unless you ask it of me. I won't speak of your past as if it belongs to me. And no one under my roof will lay blame on the child for being born." Lydia's lips parted slightly, as if she had expected less. Samuel continued before his courage could thin. "I can promise safety. I can promise fairness. I can promise food at my table as long as there is food to divide. But I won't stand here and pretend I know how to be father to another man's child before I've even seen its face." Her eyes lowered then. He hated that they did. So he added quieter, "I will never be cruel to it. That promise I can make today." When Lydia looked up again, something in her expression had changed. Not trust. That would take more than a few careful words in a yard full of witnesses, but perhaps the first thin edge of belief. "That is more honest than what I have been given before," she said. Judge Harrow turned away for a moment, his jaw working as if he had swallowed something bitter. When he faced Samuel again, he looked older than he had when he arrived. "The ceremony can be done this afternoon," the judge said, quietly. "No," Lydia said. Both men looked at her. She drew in a breath. Her gloved hand pressed once against her middle, not dramatic, only steadying. "Quietly, yes, but not as if I am being hidden in a cellar. If I am to walk into this house, I will walk in through the front door." For the first time that morning, Samuel almost smiled. "Front door it is," he said. Mrs. Vale must have heard, because she stepped out onto the porch with flour on one cheek and her gray hair coming loose from its pins. Her eyes went first to Lydia, then to Samuel, then to the judge. She wiped her hands on her apron. "Well," she said, as if arrangements like this happened every Thursday before noon, "if there's to be marrying, somebody ought to eat first." Danny grinned. Abram scowled at him until the grin disappeared, though not completely. Lydia looked toward the porch, toward the open door, toward the strange house that was about to become her shelter and her uncertainty all at once. Samuel saw her shoulders tremble once before she stilled them. He did not offer his arm right away. A promise made too soon could become another kind of pressure. Instead, he stepped aside, leaving the path clear. Lydia noticed, and after a moment by her own choice, she walked past her father, past Samuel, and up the porch steps. At the threshold, she paused. Mrs. Vale reached for her hand. "Come in, Mrs. Whitaker." The name had not been made legal yet, but it landed in the doorway like a lantern being lit before dark. Lydia swallowed hard and stepped inside. Samuel remained in the yard a moment longer with Judge Harrow beside him. Neither man spoke. Across the farm, wind moved through the young wheat, bending it all one way, then letting it rise again. In Samuel's pocket, the bank letter waited. In his house, a woman carrying another man's child had just crossed his threshold. And for the first time in many months, Samuel could not tell whether the weight settling on him was another burden or the beginning of a home he had not known he was missing. The legal marriage of Samuel Whitaker and Lydia Harrow took place in the front room after dinner, with the smell of fried potatoes still hanging in the air and rain beginning softly against the windows. Judge Harrow performed no ceremony himself. That would have felt too much like a man building a fence around his own mistake. Instead, he had brought Reverend Miles Tabor from the small Methodist chapel west of town, a quiet man with silver spectacles and the good sense to ask no questions not already answered by the faces in the room. Lydia stood beside Samuel in the brown dress she had worn to the farm. Mrs. Vale had brushed the road dust from the hem and pinned the blue ribbon at Lydia's throat more neatly, though the ribbon still looked too cheerful for the hour. Samuel wore his black coat, the same one he wore to funerals, bank meetings, and the rare Sunday when rain kept the fields from needing him. One cuff had been mended twice. Lydia noticed because she noticed everything when she was frightened. Abram Pike stood near the cold fireplace, arms folded, weathered face unreadable beneath heavy brows. Danny Bell stood by the parlor door, too nervous to lean and too young to hide it. Mrs. Vale kept one hand on the back of Lydia's chair, as though a chair could somehow need steadying. There were no flowers, no neighbors, no music, no cake cooling beneath a cloth. Only a paper on the table, a preacher's soft voice, and two people promising before God and witnesses to honor something neither one had chosen from the heart. When Reverend Tabor said the words that made them husband and wife, Samuel did not reach for Lydia's hand. He only turned toward her with a grave nod, as if receiving a duty that deserved respect. Lydia was grateful for that. She was also ashamed of being grateful. Her father signed first as witness. His pen scratched too loudly across the license. Then Mrs. Vale signed, pressing hard enough to leave a blot at the end of her name. Abram refused the pen until Reverend Tabor explained that 2 witnesses were enough, but a third would do no harm. Then Abram took it with the expression of a man agreeing to shoe a mule in a thunderstorm. Danny whispered, "Can I sign too?" Abram muttered, "You can sign when you stop spelling barn with an E." Danny flushed. Mrs. Vale hid a smile behind her hand. For one small moment the room breathed. Lydia looked at Samuel then and found him watching the boy with something like tired affection. It was the first warm thing she had seen in his face. After the preacher left, Judge Harrow lingered near the door. Rain tapped harder now, turning the yard to dark patches of mud. His buggy waited beneath the cottonwood, the horse stamping at wet ground. Lydia stood with him in the hall. Samuel had stepped away to pay Reverend Tabor, though she suspected he had done it to give them privacy. Her father looked at her as if there were 100 things he wished to say, and none that would repair the day. "I will come by next week," he said. "If you wish." The answer hurt him. She saw it land. "Lydia," he said quietly, "I did not know how else to keep you safe." She looked past him toward the rain. "I know." But knowing did not soften everything. Judge Harrow had raised her with rules, books, careful meals, and the belief that a person's name was a kind of house. Keep it clean, and you could live inside it safely. She had believed him. She had believed Russell Vane, too, with his pressed waistcoats and his letters written in fine black ink. He had spoken of marriage as if it were waiting just beyond the next appointment, the next journey, the next county school report. Then the letters stopped. The first week, Lydia told herself weather delayed the post. The second week, she told herself business had overtaken him. The third week, she wrote to the last address he had given and received her own letter back, unopened, marked undeliverable in a stranger's hand. By then, the morning sickness had begun. Her father had not shouted when she told him. That almost made it worse. He had sat down slowly in his study chair, one hand on the carved arm, and looked not angry but stricken. A judge could punish lawbreakers. A father could not sentence shame away from his daughter's life. The town did not know yet, not fully, But towns had a way of knowing before they knew. Women stopped speaking when Lydia entered the mercantile. Two men outside the courthouse took off their hats too late after staring too long. Mrs. Prout from the sewing circle asked whether Lydia had been feeling poorly with a sweetness sharp enough to cut thread. Her father began looking at doors, windows, faces. Then he looked at Samuel Whitaker. Samuel, who owed the bank. Samuel, who needed money but had never begged for it. Samuel, who had once carried a feverish neighbor's child 6 miles through snow because the doctor's horse had gone lame. Samuel, who kept people under his roof even when the town said a sensible man would reduce his burden. Lydia had asked her father only one question when he told her. "Does he know everything?" "Yes," Judge Harrow had said. "And he still considers it?" "Yes." That had been the first thing about Samuel Whitaker that frightened her less. Now her father stood in the hallway of Samuel's house, looking like a man who had won his case and lost something dearer. "I have arranged the funds through your mother's estate," he said. "They will be transferred properly. It will be yours by law, not mine to hold over either of you." Lydia turned back to him. "Does Mr. Whitaker know that?" "Samuel knows enough. He should know all of it." Her father blinked. "That money is meant to protect you." "Then do not begin my marriage by hiding its shape from the man who took me in." It was the first time she had called it her marriage. Both of them heard it. Judge Harrow nodded slowly. "Very well." Samuel returned before her father left, and Lydia watched the two men speak beside the front door. Her father explained the money more plainly then. It was not a bride price. It was not payment for silence. It was $400 left by Lydia's mother, meant originally for Lydia's household when she married. Her father would see it placed in Lydia's name. If Lydia chose, she could invest part of it in the farm as a secured household interest, enough to help Samuel make a bank payment and buy time. Samuel listened without moving. At last he said, "I won't take money that belongs to her unless she signs for it freely." "I will sign," Lydia said from the hall. Samuel looked over his shoulder. Her hands were cold, but she kept them still. "If this farm is to shelter me, I have reason to help keep its roof sound, but I want the accounts open to me, every figure, every note, every debt." Abram gave a short sound from the parlor. It might have been a cough, it might not. Samuel did not look offended. If anything, he looked relieved to hear a clear condition. "That is fair," he said. "The office is off the kitchen. The ledgers are poor company, but they tell the truth when a man lets them." "Then I will read them." Mrs. Vale, standing behind Lydia, murmured, "Good. Maybe somebody finally will." Samuel glanced at her. "I read them." "You stare at them," Mrs. Vale said. "That is not always the same thing." Danny made a choking noise, trying not to laugh. Abram's mouth twitched and then went flat again. Judge Harrow took his leave soon after. Lydia did not walk him to the buggy. She could not. If she stepped into the rain with him, some soft part of her might climb into that buggy and go home, and home was no longer a place that could save her. So she stood in the doorway and watched him drive away alone. When the buggy disappeared beyond the bend, Samuel closed the door gently, not quickly. He stood beside her in the hall with a careful distance between them. "I'll show you your room," he said. He carried her valise himself, though she told him it was not heavy. He did not argue. He only lifted it and started up the stairs. Her room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, a braided rug, and a window that faced the creek. Someone had placed fresh towels on the chair and a chipped blue pitcher by the basin. On the bed lay a folded quilt, faded at the corners but carefully mended. "Mrs. Vale chose the room," Samuel said. "It gets morning light." Lydia set one hand on the quilt. "It is kind." "She is." He stood near the door, hat in both hands, looking too large for the little room and too uncertain for the man everyone called Steady. "My room is across the hall," he said. "I won't come in unless you ask or unless there is need. If anything in this house makes you uneasy, tell Mrs. Vale if you would rather not tell me." Lydia looked at him then. You speak as if you are afraid of frightening me. I am. The honesty settled between them. Outside, rain ran down the window glass in thin, crooked lines. I am already frightened, Lydia said, but not only of you. Samuel nodded slowly, as if that answer deserved room. Then he reached into his coat pocket and took out a folded letter. The paper was worn at the edges from being opened too often. This came from the bank yesterday, he said. You asked for every figure, this is where they begin. She stared at the letter. Most men she knew would have hidden such a thing from a wife for months, perhaps forever. Samuel was handing it to her before the ink on their license had fully dried. Lydia took it. Their fingers did not touch. Thank you, she said. It is not a gift. No, she answered, unfolding the letter. It is trust. Samuel's face changed slightly, as if the word had struck nearer than she meant it to. Downstairs, Mrs. Vale called Danny away from the pantry before he ate the last of the sugared peaches. Abram's boots crossed the porch. Rain softened the fields outside. The house moved around Lydia as if it had known its own rhythms for years and did not yet know how to make space for hers. She stood in that small room, holding a bank letter in one hand and her future in the other. By nightfall, she would learn that Samuel Whitaker's farm was closer to failing than anyone in town guessed. By morning, Samuel would learn that the woman he had married for protection could read numbers with sharper eyes than any banker who had ever looked down on him. But for now, they remained two strangers on either side of a bargain, both wondering which would prove heavier, the debt on the land or the child not yet born. By the second morning of her marriage, Lydia learned that Whitaker Farm woke before the sun and expected everyone else to do the same. She opened her eyes to the sound of boots crossing the porch below, a door latch lifting, then the low murmur of men speaking in the yard. For a moment she forgot where she was. The ceiling above her was lower than the one in her father's house. The quilt over her knees smelled faintly of cedar and sun. Rain had stopped sometime in the night, and a pale gray light pressed against the window facing the creek. Then she remembered. Married. Not loved, not courted, not chosen in the way girls were told they ought to be chosen. But married. Her hand moved to her middle before she rose. The child within her was still too small to stir with certainty, though sometimes she imagined a flutter when she was frightened. She stood slowly, waited for the morning dizziness to pass, then dressed in the plainest gown she had brought. It had narrow sleeves, a high collar, and no foolish trim. She pinned her hair tightly enough to pull at her temples. If she could not feel steady, she would at least look it. Downstairs, the kitchen was already alive. Mrs. Vale stood at the stove, turning ham in a black skillet with one hand while pulling biscuits from the oven with the other. Flour dusted her apron and streaked one cheek. Danny Bell sat at the table shelling boiled eggs faster than he ate them, which was saying something. Abram Pike leaned near the back door with coffee in his tin cup, his hat still on indoors until Mrs. Vale noticed and cleared her throat. Abram removed it with a grunt. Samuel stood by the sink washing mud from his hands. His sleeves were rolled to the forearms, and his dark hair still held the damp shape of morning work. He looked up when Lydia entered, then looked away just as quickly, as if he did not want his attention to feel like a claim. Mrs. Vale turned first. There you are, sit before you pale any further. I can help, Lydia said. You can sit. I am not ill. No, Mrs. Vale said, sliding biscuits onto a plate. You are carrying a baby before breakfast. That is enough work for the moment. Danny's eyes widened. Abram's brows lowered. Samuel looked at the stove as if it had become deeply interesting. Lydia felt heat rise into her face. Mrs. Vale must have seen it, because her voice softened without becoming sweet. There is no shame in needing food before chores. Half the men here are useless without coffee, and no one calls that delicate. Danny lifted his cup. I am useful after coffee. You are loud after coffee, Abram said. That is a kind of useful if spirits are low. No one's spirits are that low. Lydia almost smiled before she could stop herself. Samuel pulled out the chair beside the table but did not touch her. Mrs. Vale's orders are hard to survive if crossed. I hear that, Lydia said. She sat. Breakfast was not unfriendly, but it was strange. The household spoke around her more than to her, not out of cruelty but uncertainty. Samuel asked Abram about the lower fence. Abram answered in short phrases. Danny reported that one of the mares had kicked loose a stall board, which led to Mrs. Vale telling him it would not have happened if he stopped whistling at horses as if they were dance partners. Danny said he only whistled at the gentle ones. Abram said that proved his lack of judgment. Lydia ate what she could and listened. No one mentioned the wedding. No one mentioned her father. No one asked about Russell Vane. For that kindness, she was grateful enough that it hurt. After breakfast, she reached for the dishes, but Mrs. Vale placed one firm hand over the stack. You may dry, she said. You may not carry a wash tub your first week here just to prove a point. I was not proving a point. Every young woman who says that is proving 3. Lydia took the towel. The first plate slipped in her hands and struck the edge of the table hard enough to chip. She froze. Mrs. Vale glanced over. That plate was ugly before you broke it. Danny leaned in. I always thought it looked like a sad toad. It was my mother's, Samuel said from the doorway. Danny went still. Samuel let the silence sit for half a heartbeat, then added, and she thought it looked like a sad toad too. Danny laughed with relief. Mrs. Vale shook her head, but Lydia saw the corner of her mouth move. Even Abram, passing through with a harness strap, made a sound that might have been approval if one were generous. Samuel's gaze met Lydia's across the room. This time he did not look away at once. It was not romance, not yet. But it was the first shared moment that did not belong to duty. By noon, Lydia had learned 3 more things. The left side of Mrs. Vale's oven ran hotter than the right. The pantry door stuck unless lifted before pulling. And Abram Pike did not trust new arrangements, new hinges, new horses, new weather signs, or new people who entered a house already carrying trouble he had not voted to invite. He did not say it cruelly. He did not have to. When Lydia carried a basket of folded towels toward the upstairs hall, Abram stepped aside on the landing but did not offer to take it. His eyes went to the basket, then to her face, then away. You should not strain yourself, he said. I am not. Folks always say that before they are. Lydia held the basket a little tighter. Do you object to me working, Mr. Pike, or only to me carrying towels? His weathered face did not change. I object to guessing what place a person means to take before she knows the house she's standing in. The words were plain enough to sting, because they were not entirely unfair. Lydia swallowed, then I will learn the house. He gave a short nod and went down the stairs. She stood there a moment, the towels warm from the stove, her pride smarting worse than her arms. She had known there would be judgment in town. She had not expected the first honest resistance to come from a man who cared less about scandal than about whether she would become another weight on Samuel's shoulders. That somehow hurt differently. In the afternoon, Mrs. Vale set her to sorting dried beans at the kitchen table. It was simple work, nearly dull enough to calm her nerves. Lydia picked out stones and shriveled skins while rainwater dripped from the eaves outside. Danny came in twice, once for a clean rag, and once because he claimed the barn had become too quiet. Barns do that when boys leave them, Mrs. Vale said. Danny dropped into the chair across from Lydia anyway. Do you play checkers, Mrs. Whitaker? The name startled her. Not because he said it, because he said it easily. I know the rules, Lydia answered. That means she beats people, Danny told Mrs. Vale. It means I know the rules. That is what people say before they beat people. Mrs. Vale pointed toward the door with a wooden spoon. Barn. Danny left, but not before grinning at Lydia, as if he had decided she might be interesting. By late afternoon, the house had quieted. Mrs. Vale went to check the smokehouse. Danny and Abram worked near the barn. Samuel had gone to the north field and had not returned. Lydia found herself standing at the little office off the kitchen. The door was open. Inside sat a narrow desk, 2 shelves of farm papers, a tin box for receipts, and a ledger lying open like an accusation. The room smelled of ink, dust, and old pipe smoke from someone long gone, probably Samuel's father. She should not have entered. She entered anyway. The ledger drew her first. She had kept her father's household accounts since she was 16, then the courthouse supply lists when the clerk fell ill one winter. Numbers had always steadied her. They did not whisper when she crossed a room. They did not decide a woman's worth by one mistake, one trust poorly placed, one child yet unborn. Numbers could be cruel, but they were not sly. Samuel's ledger was not cruel. It was wounded. Columns leaned crookedly down the page. Payments were written in 2 different inks. Receipts had been tucked between pages without dates copied properly. The bank note appeared in 3 places, each figure correct on its own, but none connected cleanly to the others. Seed cost, equipment repair, hired wages, feed, fencing wire, flour, lamp oil, doctor's fee from last winter, all of it spread like a field after wind. Lydia sat. She did not mean to work long, only to understand. Then she found an arithmetic error in the reaper payment. Not a large one, but large enough to annoy her. Then another in the tally of seed wheat. Then a receipt from Hammond's Mercantile folded inside a page where it did not belong, unpaid but not listed under outstanding accounts. She pulled a blank sheet from the desk and began sorting. When Samuel found her there near dusk, the lamp had been lit. The kitchen had gone gold with evening, and Lydia had 3 neat columns in front of her. He stopped in the doorway. She rose too quickly and had to grip the desk until the room steadied. "I am sorry," she said. "The door was open, I should have asked." Samuel looked at the papers, then at the ledger, then at the figures she had written in careful rows. "Did you change anything?" "No, I only copied what was there and separated paid from unpaid." He stepped into the room, slow enough not to crowd her. "Why?" The question had no anger in it. That made answering harder. "Because disorder hides fear," Lydia said, "and this ledger is full of it." Samuel's face went still. For a moment she thought she had gone too far. A wife of 2 days had no right to name a man's fear in his own office. Then he looked down at the ledger and let out a breath that was almost a laugh, but had no humor in it. "You are not wrong. I can stop." "No." The word came quicker than expected. He touched the back of the chair, not sitting, only grounding himself. Mud had dried along the edges of his boots. His shirt carried the smell of rain, horses, and cold air. "I have been keeping this farm alive with my hands," he said, "not always well with my books." Lydia looked at the columns. Hands matter more than books. Not when the bank reads books. She glanced up. This time the understanding between them was not soft. It was practical, sharp-edged, and real. Samuel pulled the folded bank letter from the ledger where she had placed it and set it beside her columns. "If you are willing," he said, "read it all. Tell me what I have been too tired or too proud to see." Lydia sat slowly. A strange feeling moved through her, small but steady. Not happiness, not belonging, not yet. Usefulness. Not the kind that had to earn her humanity. She had that before she entered this house. But the kind that gave her a place to put her hands when shame tried to make them useless. "I will need every receipt," she said. Samuel nodded. "You shall have them. And I will ask questions. I expect you will. Some may be uncomfortable." His mouth moved, almost smiling. Most true ones are. From the kitchen, Mrs. Vale called that supper was ready before Danny ate the cornbread meant for everyone. Abraham's boots sounded on the porch. The house gathered itself for evening. Samuel lifted the lamp and held it while Lydia stacked the papers. Neither of them touched. But as they left the office, Samuel paused and looked back at the desk, at the ledger lying open with Lydia's neat columns beside his crooked ones. For the first time since the bank letter arrived, The numbers looked less like a sentence and more like a question. And Lydia, walking into supper under a name still new enough to ache, realized the farm had not welcomed her yet. But it had given her work only she could do. For the next 10 days, Lydia Whitaker learned the farm through paper before she learned it through soil. Samuel gave her the receipts first. He brought them in an old cigar box after supper, set it on the office desk, and stood there as if laying down a burden he had carried too long in both hands. "There may be duplicates," he said. Lydia opened the lid. Inside lay folded bills, bank notices, pencil notes, feed tallies, seed orders, a torn invoice for harness leather, and 3 slips from Hammond's Mercantile that had no date at all. Some were smoothed flat. Some had been crushed and shoved into corners. One receipt had a coffee stain across the total, and another carried a muddy thumbprint that looked like it had been made in anger. She looked up at him. "There are not duplicates." "No. There is a storm." Samuel lowered his head once, not quite a laugh. "That sounds right." He left her alone after that, though not because he lacked interest. Lydia heard his footsteps pause outside the office more than once. Each time, he kept walking. That restraint became one of the first things she began to know about him. Samuel Whitaker did not crowd a person after giving them a task. He waited to be invited back into it. The office became her place in the house. Not hers in ownership. Nothing in that house yet felt hers that way. But the chair remembered the shape of her by afternoon. The ink bottle sat where her hand expected it. A chipped cup full of sharpened pencils waited near the ledger. Mrs. Vale began leaving tea on the corner of the desk without comment, along with a heel of bread or a sliced apple when Lydia forgot the noon meal. "You count better when you eat," Mrs. Vale said one afternoon. "I count the same." "You frown kinder." That was as close as Mrs. Vale came to fussing. Lydia sorted the farm into columns: seed and feed, wages and household, equipment and repairs, bank interest, store accounts, crop projections. She copied every figure in her careful hand and marked any uncertainty with a small cross in the margin. At her father's house, figures had been clean and obedient. Court fees, household purchases, charitable accounts, coal bills, paper orders. On a farm, numbers had mud on them. A broken wheel could ruin a week's calculation. A sick mare could make a neat budget foolish. Rain could help one field and drown another. Still, numbers told stories if a person had patience. By the 4th day, Lydia saw that Samuel's trouble had not come from waste. That mattered to her more than she expected. He had not spent foolishly on comforts. He had not gambled on luxuries or hidden money in prideful display. His mistake had been hope. Wheat prices had climbed the year before, and he had borrowed for a new reaper blade, extra seed, fencing wire, and 2 hired harvest hands he never got to use properly after the freeze took part of the early growth. He had stretched because the farm might have grown. Then the season punished him for believing it. When she told him this, Samuel stood in the office doorway with his hat in his hands, fresh dust on his sleeves. "So I was not foolish," he said. "I did not say that." His eyes lifted. "You were not careless," she corrected. "That is different." A faint smile crossed his mouth and disappeared. "I will take different." She showed him the columns. "Your greatest danger is not the full note. It is timing. If you could make a respectable payment by September, the bank might extend the rest. But if the crop sells at the lower estimate, you will be short." "How short?" She turned the page toward him. He read the number and said nothing. The silence was answer enough. That evening at supper, the household felt the weight without knowing the figure. Samuel was quieter than usual. Abram watched him over his coffee. Danny talked too much, which Lydia was beginning to understand meant he was worried. Mrs. Vale cut the cornbread into smaller pieces so the plate looked fuller. Lydia wanted to speak, but the table was not yet a place where she knew her right to do so. Abram decided for her. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said, using the name with stiffness, not warmth. "You've been in those books near a week. They tell you anything useful or just make the ink feel important?" Danny looked at him. Mrs. Vale's knife stopped against her plate. Samuel's jaw tightened. Lydia set down her fork. "They tell me the farm is not failing because of laziness," she said. "They tell me Mr. Whitaker pays wages before comfort. They tell me the new fencing cost more than expected because the west posts rotted below ground, not because anyone ordered too much wire. They tell me the reaper payment was entered twice in the worry column and once in the real one." Danny blinked. "There is a worry column. There is when a man writes the same debt 3 times. Mrs. Vale made a soft sound into her napkin. Abraham's eyes narrowed, but not unkindly. "And what else do they tell you?" Lydia looked at Samuel before answering. He gave no permission. He also gave no warning. That, she decided, was permission enough. "They tell me harvest must be handled carefully. If the wheat is mixed without regard to quality, a buyer will pay for the worst and profit from the best. If the better grain is kept separate and sampled honestly, it may bring enough to matter." Abram leaned back. "You know wheat grades now." "No," Lydia said, "but I know when a number is hiding inside another number. I would need someone who knows the crop to tell me whether the difference is real." The room quieted. Outside, a hen scratched near the porch boards. The stove popped softly. Abram looked at Samuel. Samuel looked back at him. Then the old man turned to Lydia again. "South Rise will be best if rust don't touch it. Creek Field grows heavier but dirtier. North Strip is thin this year. If you want separate tallies, you'll need wagon marks, bin space, and men who don't grumble at extra work." Danny raised his hand slightly. "I can grumble and work." "You prove that daily," Abram said. Lydia reached for a scrap of paper from the sideboard without thinking. "How many bins can be cleared before harvest?" Abram stared at her. Then slowly he answered. By the end of supper, the plates had gone cold and the table had become a planning board. Samuel fetched a pencil. Danny argued that paint marks on wagon boards would work better than tied cloth because cloth came loose. Mrs. Vale said if men were going to track field lots through her yard, they would wash mud off the wheels before supper or eat outside like coyotes. Abram corrected Lydia twice, sharply, about bushels, weight, and yield. She wrote down every correction and asked for another. Samuel said little, but Lydia felt him watching. Not with suspicion, not with pity, with attention. After the meal, while Mrs. Vale banked the stove and Danny carried water, Lydia gathered the marked papers. A cramp of tiredness pulled low through her back, and she pressed one hand briefly to the chair. Samuel saw. He crossed the room, lifted the stack of ledgers from the table, and carried them to the office without asking. "I could have carried those," she said when she followed. "I know. Then why did you?" He set them on the desk. "Because knowing a thing does not mean I have to let you prove it every hour." The words might have offended her from another man. From him, they sounded less like command than care trying not to show its face. Lydia looked down at the papers, so he would not see what that did to her. On the top sheet, Abram's rough field notes sat beside her neat figures. Danny's wagon mark idea had been added in the corner. Samuel's hand had circled the September payment date. 4 kinds of writing on one page. 4 people trying, in their own way, not to lose the same home. For the first time since she crossed the threshold, Lydia understood that Whitaker Farm was not merely a place Samuel owned. It was a place held together by everyone who feared what would happen if it came apart. And that night before she went upstairs, Samuel placed a fresh ledger on the office desk. The cover was plain brown leather, new, unmarked. "I bought it last winter," he said. "Never used it. Seemed foolish to start clean when the old books were already tangled." Lydia touched the cover with her fingertips. "What changed?" Samuel stood beside the lamp, his face half-shadowed, his voice quiet. "You came." He left before the words could become anything more. Lydia remained in the office, one hand resting on the new ledger, listening to his boots climb the stairs across the hall from her room. The house had not become hers, but somewhere inside its troubled walls, a page had opened that had not been there before. The first real kindness Samuel gave Lydia was not a compliment, nor a promise, nor anything that could be held up in daylight and named. It was a floorboard. The loose plank outside her bedroom door had complained under her step every morning since she arrived. It was not loud enough to wake the house, but it was sharp enough to make her pause, especially at night when she crossed the hall for water and did not want anyone thinking she was restless. She had mentioned it once to Mrs. Vale while folding towels, only because the older woman asked whether the room suited her. The next morning, the board was quiet. Lydia stood in the hallway with her hand on the banister and stepped back on it twice, testing. No creak, no complaint, just a new nail head set neatly into the wood and a faint mark where someone had planed the edge down smooth. Across the hall, Samuel's door was already open. His bed was made with plain, soldierly order. He had gone out before sunrise. He had heard, or Mrs. Vale had told him. Either way, he had fixed the trouble without making her ask twice and without waiting to be thanked. That was Samuel's way. She was learning. He gave care and repairs. By breakfast, Lydia noticed another thing. The water bucket that usually sat near the back door had been moved onto the bench beside the stove, full and covered. She looked at it, then at Mrs. Vale. Mrs. Vale did not look up from cutting apples into a bowl. Well, pump handle sticks after rain. It has not rained in 4 days. Sticks in spirit, then. Danny snorted into his coffee. Samuel entered before Lydia could answer, bringing cold air and the smell of damp hay with him. His eyes flicked to the bucket, then to Lydia, then away. Abram saw the whole of it and muttered, "Pumps worked fine 30 years. Mrs. Vale pointed the apple knife at him. "So have you, and we still don't let you climb the loft ladder when your knee swells." "My knee does not swell. It announces weather better than the rooster." Danny leaned toward Lydia. His knee said Tuesday would rain. "It did rain Tuesday," Abram said. "Then you admit it." "I admit nothing." Lydia lowered her face over her plate to hide a smile. It came easier now, though still carefully, as if joy were a dish she was not certain she had permission to touch. The days had begun to take a shape. Samuel left early for the fields. Abram moved between barn, pasture, and fence lines with the severe patience of a man who believed livestock respected only those who expected disappointment. Danny followed him, argued with him, and learned more than he admitted. Mrs. Vale governed the kitchen, laundry, pantry, and everyone's common sense. Lydia worked the office in the morning, helped lightly in the kitchen when allowed, rested when her body demanded it, and returned to the ledgers before supper. She was not useless. That mattered more than she wanted to confess. Still, usefulness did not erase awkwardness. At night, she and Samuel climbed the stairs at different times. His room stood across from hers, close enough that she heard the soft thud of his boots when he removed them, the scrape of a chair, sometimes the tired breath of a man lowering himself onto a bed after too much labor. They were husband and wife by law, but the hallway between them remained as wide as a river. One evening near the end of June, Lydia sat in the kitchen mending a tear in Samuel's work shirt, while Mrs. Vale rolled pie crust at the counter. The shirt had appeared beside Lydia's sewing basket without explanation. She suspected Mrs. Vale had put it there on purpose. The tear ran along the shoulder seam where hard work had pulled at old cloth. Lydia threaded the needle and took careful stitches, aware of the shape of the garment in her lap, the worn collar, the faint smell of soap and sun that belonged to Samuel more than to the shirt. Mrs. Vale glanced over. "He catches that shoulder on the granary door every time he forgets to duck." "He forgets often." Samuel forgets many things when his mind is in a field 3 acres away. Lydia tied off the thread. "He remembers other things." Mrs. Vale's hand slowed on the rolling pin. Lydia wished at once she had not spoken. But Mrs. Vale only said, "Yes, he does." Samuel came in as Lydia was folding the shirt. He stopped when he saw it in her hands. For a moment he looked almost embarrassed. "Mrs. Vale said it needed mending," Lydia said. "It did. I am not as fine with a needle as she is." "No one is." Mrs. Vale sniffed. Truth improves a man's manners. Samuel took the shirt from Lydia, and this time their fingers brushed. It was nothing, a touch so slight it could have been ignored by anyone watching. Lydia did not ignore it. Neither did Samuel. His hand stilled for half a second around the cloth before he stepped back. "Thank you." "You are welcome." Mrs. Vale became deeply interested in the pie crust. That night, Lydia lay awake longer than she should have, listening to a moth tap itself against the chimney lamp. She told herself the touch had meant nothing. Samuel had not meant it. She had not meant it. People handed one another things every day without building a whole foolish feeling around it. But her fingers remembered. The next Sunday brought her first trip into Mercy Ridge as Mrs. Whitaker. She had not wanted to go. She had said as much only to Mrs. Vale, who stood beside her bed helping loosen the creases from her blue calico dress. "You need not go," Mrs. Vale said. "No one here will make you. Staying away will sound like hiding. Sometimes hiding is rest." Lydia looked at herself in the small mirror. Her face seemed thinner than before. Her eyes looked older. Her middle was still modest beneath the dress, but she saw what others would soon see clearly. "I have hidden enough inside other people's decisions," she said. Mrs. Vale's expression softened. "Then wear the blue. It makes you look like the sky has taken your side." At church, whispers did not rise loudly. Mercy Ridge was too polite for that. The judgment came in pauses, in two women shifting down a pew to make room, but not too much room. In Mrs. Prout holding Lydia's hand a moment longer than kindness required, while her eyes dipped briefly to Lydia's waist. In a young wife Lydia had once helped with reading lessons, suddenly finding interest in the hymn book. Samuel did not act as if he noticed. That could have hurt had he ignored it from cowardice. But when service ended and people gathered outside beneath the cottonwoods, Mrs. Prout approached with a smile thin as thread. "Mrs. Whitaker," she said, "how quickly life can change. Your father must be relieved to see you so settled." Lydia felt the words slide beneath her skin. Before she could answer, Samuel stepped beside her, not in front of her, beside. "My wife is settling by doing half the work my books have needed for 2 years," he said evenly. "If relief is owed, it may be mine." Mrs. Prout blinked. Lydia turned her face toward him. Samuel's expression remained calm, almost dull, as if he had said nothing of note. But his hand rested lightly at his side, close enough that she could take it if she wished, far enough that no one could call it possession. Mrs. Prout murmured something about good order being a blessing and moved away. Lydia waited until they were walking toward the wagon before she spoke. "You did not have to answer for me." "No," Samuel said. "I answered for myself." She spoke as if I had been given a burden. I disagreed. The wagon wheel creaked beneath his foot as he climbed up and reached back, not touching her, only offering the choice. Lydia placed her hand in his. His palm was rough and warm. He helped her onto the seat, then released her at once. That was when she knew he was not only careful because of their agreement. He was careful because the agreement mattered to him. If you believe love can begin with respect before it ever finds words, stay with Samuel and Lydia's story. Some hearts do not open suddenly. They open by being treated gently, day after day. The ride home passed under a high blue sky with wheat bending soft on both sides of the road. Danny rode behind them on the bay mare, whistling off-key until Abram threatened to make him walk. Mrs. Vale sat with a basket of church leftovers on her lap and pretended not to watch Lydia's hand resting near Samuel's on the wagon seat. Late that evening, after supper, Lydia went looking for a misplaced receipt from Hammond's and found herself near the barn. A lantern burned inside, though the yard had gone dark. She heard the faint scrape of a plane against wood. She should have gone back. Instead, she stepped close enough to see through the half-open door. Samuel stood at the workbench, sleeves rolled, head bent over a curved piece of pale pine. Several small slats lay beside it, each shaped with patient care. Wood shavings curled around his boots like ribbons. He ran his thumb along one edge, frowned, and began smoothing it again. It was too small for a chair, too curved for a shelf. Lydia's breath caught before she could stop it. A cradle, not finished, not even fully formed, but clear enough in its beginning. Samuel had once told her he could not promise love for a child he did not know. She had believed him. She still did. But there he was in the lantern light, making room with his hands before his heart had learned the words. She backed away quietly, leaving him to the work he had not meant for her to see. At the porch, she paused and looked back toward the barn. The plane scraped again, steady and careful. Inside the house, Mrs. Vale had left a lamp burning low in the hall. The repaired floorboard waited upstairs. The mended shirt hung by the stove. The ledger lay open in the office with both her handwriting and Samuel's on the same page. Lydia climbed the stairs slowly, one hand on the rail, the other resting over the child beneath her heart. For the first time since Russell Vane's last unanswered letter, she let herself imagine that the future might not be only something to survive. It might be something being built, quietly, in a barn after dark. The trouble came in the first week of July, not with a shout, but with a sky that turned the wrong color. All afternoon the heat had lain heavy over Whitaker Farm. The air held still against the windows. Chickens stood open-beaked in the shade of the wagon shed. Even Danny had stopped whistling, which made Abram say the weather must be worse than he thought. Lydia sat in the office with a damp cloth at the back of her neck, copying field estimates from Abram's rough notes into the new ledger. The baby had begun moving more often now, not strongly enough to startle her, but with small secret turns that made her pause with her pen in the air. South Rise, strongest heads. Creek Field, good yield, must clean carefully. North Strip, thin but usable. She wrote the words neatly, then added wagon marks in the margin. Red slash for South Rise, black circle for Creek Field, 2 notches for North Strip. It should have comforted her, seeing order on the page. Instead, she kept looking toward the window. Beyond the yard, wheat moved in restless waves beneath a wind that had not yet reached the house. The heads were still green gold, not ready, but close enough that every week mattered. Samuel had walked the fields that morning with Abram and come back quieter than usual. They both knew a crop could look almost safe and still be lost. Mrs. Vale appeared in the office doorway with a glass of buttermilk. "Drink." "I am not thirsty." "Then your mouth is lying." Lydia took the glass. Mrs. Vale stepped in and looked out the window. Her face changed slightly. That cloud over the west ridge was not there 10 minutes ago. Lydia followed her gaze. A bank of dark sky was rising behind the far pasture, thick and low, with a greenish cast at its belly. The kind of color that made older people stop speaking and reach for windows. Mrs. Vale set her jaw. "I'll pull the wash." By the time Lydia reached the kitchen, the household had shifted into storm habit. Danny ran across the yard to latch the chicken coop. Abram limped faster than most men walked, dragging loose tools under the shed roof. Samuel drove the mares from the open lot toward the barn, one hand raised against dust that had begun to sweep along the ground. The wind arrived all at once. It struck the house hard enough to rattle the stove pipe. Lydia gripped the edge of the table. Outside, the wheat bent nearly flat, then rose, then bent again. Mrs. Vale came in with half the wash gathered in her arms and one sheet dragging behind her. "Shut the east windows." Lydia moved to help. "No lifting," Mrs. Vale snapped. "I can close windows." "Then close, don't haul." Rain began as large scattered drops that slapped dust into dark spots. Then came a sound like pebbles thrown across the porch. Lydia froze. Abram entered at a hard limp, hat in hand, hair wet at the temples. "Hail." Samuel was still outside. Lydia turned toward the door, but Abram caught the look before she moved. "He's at the barn. He'll stay there if he has sense." Mrs. Vale gave a dry laugh. Men and sense separate during weather. The hail hardened. It struck the roof in a roar that swallowed every smaller sound. White stones bounced in the yard, first small as peas, then larger, sharp and fast. They leapt from the porch boards and burst in the mud beside the steps. The horses screamed once from the barn, and Samuel's voice carried faintly through the storm, low and steady, calming them. Lydia stood at the kitchen window and watched the wheat take the beating. Every strike seemed personal. The field beyond the yard blurred behind rain and ice. Stalks whipped, flattened, rose again, then broke under the next wave. Hailstones gathered along the fence line like spilled bone buttons. The sky had gone so dark that Mrs. Vale lit a lamp at 4 in the afternoon. Danny burst through the back door soaked to the skin, one sleeve torn, grin gone from his face. Coops latched. I got the little gray hen under the steps. Abram looked him over. You bleeding? No. Then stopped dripping on the floor like a roof leak. Danny did not answer. He went to the window beside Lydia and stared. For 11 minutes by the kitchen clock, nobody could do anything. That was the cruelty of it. Work could answer many troubles. Hunger, broken fences, dirty accounts. Even loneliness had chores to soften its teeth, but Hale gave no one a task while it fell. It only demanded witnesses. Samuel came in when the worst had passed, hat gone, shoulders wet, a shallow red mark along one cheek where ice had caught him. Lydia stepped toward him before remembering herself. He saw the movement, so did Mrs. Vale, so did Abram, though he kindly pretended to examine his hat. You're hurt, Lydia said. It's nothing. Mrs. Vale took one look at him and reached for a cloth. Every man says that while leaking. Samuel accepted the cloth because arguing would have wasted strength. Through the window, the storm moved east, leaving behind dripping eaves, torn leaves, and pale hail melting in the yard. The wheat fields looked wrong, not destroyed everywhere, but bruised in wide, uneven patches, as if a giant hand had pressed down wherever it pleased. Samuel stood in the kitchen doorway looking out. No one asked what he thought. They could see it. The next morning, they walked the fields. Lydia was not meant to go far, but she insisted on seeing the south rise from the wagon track. Samuel did not like it. His mouth made that clear, but he did not forbid her, and for that she was grateful. The air smelled of wet earth and broken green things. Hailstones still hid in shaded ruts, melting slowly beside snapped wheat heads. Danny paced the damaged strips, calling out rough measures. Abram knelt in the rows, testing stalks between his fingers, his face carved into harder lines than usual. Samuel walked ahead of Lydia, then stopped where the best wheat should have stood. The south rise had been hit unevenly. Some rows still held. Others lay bent and stripped, grain knocked loose into the mud before it had reached full weight. Abram spat into the dirt, not all gone. No, Samuel said. Enough gone. Yes. Danny came back from the lower edge, breathing hard. Creek fields better, north strips no worse than it was. Abram nodded. We cut damaged sections separate when they're ready, don't mix it. Anything broken bad gets feed use if it's worth that. Best heads stay apart. His eyes flicked toward Lydia. She understood what he was giving her. Not warmth, not comfort, information. She opened the small notebook she had brought and wrote as quickly as her hand allowed. Samuel noticed, you should sit. I am sitting when we return. That was not what I said. It is what I can promise. Danny looked between them and wisely found interest in a fence post. Abram almost smiled, almost. By noon, the first estimate was finished. By supper, Lydia had the numbers laid across the kitchen table because the office felt too small for the trouble. The table held the new ledger, Abram's field marks, Danny's pacing counts, Samuel's bank letter, and Mrs. Vale's cold biscuits because everyone had forgotten to eat warm ones. A strip of hail-damaged wheat lay near the lamp, placed there by Abram like evidence. Lydia worked the figures twice. The first time, she hoped she was wrong. The second time, she knew she was not. Samuel stood behind his chair, both hands resting on the back. He had not sat down since coming in. His wet boots had dried mud along the sides. The red mark on his cheek had darkened. How bad? He asked. Lydia turned the page toward him. If prices hold where you hoped, and if the sound grain grades well, there may still be enough for a payment. Not all of what the bank wants, but enough to argue for time. Abram made a low sound. If prices hold. Lydia looked at him. Yes. Samuel read the number silently. His face did not change much. It did not need to. Lydia had learned by now that his stillness was where pain went when he would not spend it on speech. Mrs. Vale brought coffee to the table, though no one had asked. Danny did not reach for his. I can hire out in town after harvest, Danny said suddenly. Hammond needs hauling done, I heard him say. Samuel looked up. No. I can. You are needed here. I eat here. And you work here. I could do both. Samuel's voice stayed quiet. You are not paying for a storm, Danny. The boy's face tightened with the shame of wanting to help, and being told he could not fix enough. Lydia recognized it. She lived with its cousin. Abram picked up the damaged wheat head and rubbed it between his fingers. We save what can be saved. No mourning before the burial. Mrs. Vale nodded, and no starving before supper. That ended the meeting because she decided it did. But later, after the dishes were washed and the house had settled into the kind of silence that follows bad news, Lydia remained in the office with the lamp turned low. She could hear Samuel on the porch, not moving, only sitting in the dark. She could hear Abram in the barn checking things that did not need checking. Danny had gone quiet in the loft. Mrs. Vale hummed softly in the pantry, a hymn without words. Lydia looked at the figures until they blurred. Then she took out the letters her father had sent with her things. Old correspondence from his courthouse and trade acquaintances, tied in a blue ribbon. She had packed them because she did not know what else from her former life might prove useful in the new one. One letter mentioned grain shipments west of Mercy Ridge. Another mentioned a buyer in Clearwater County, who paid by stricter grade standards than the local agent. She sat straighter. The idea was not a solution yet. It was hardly even a hope. The crop was damaged. The debt remained. The bank would not soften because a pregnant woman had neat handwriting and a tired husband. But not all wheat was equal. Not all buyers judged the same. And not every door had to be opened with money. Some opened with a name, a letter, or the courage to ask without begging. Lydia reached for a clean sheet. Her back ached. The child shifted low, as if reminding her she was not made of paper and will alone. She paused, breathed through it, and kept writing. On the porch outside, Samuel's chair creaked once. Lydia dipped the pen again. The hail had broken the wheat, but it had also shown exactly how careful they would have to be now. No mixed loads, no lazy grading, no single buyer allowed to decide the worth of a whole farm from one muddy sample. By the time Samuel came in, she had written 3 names at the top of the page. He stopped in the office doorway. You should be asleep. So should you. I could not. Neither could I. His eyes moved to the paper. What is that? Lydia looked at the names, then at the man who had taken her into his house with conditions honest enough to be trusted. Possibly nothing, she said. Possibly a way to make the good wheat speak louder than the damaged. Samuel stepped inside. The lamp threw both their shadows across the ledger, long and uncertain, touching where their bodies did not. For the first time since the storm, his face changed. Not hope. Not yet. But the place where hope might stand if it were brave enough to enter. By morning, Lydia's 3 names had become 5 pages of notes. She had written until the lamp burned low, and the house settled into the deep quiet that comes after worry has worn everyone thin. When sleep finally took her, it came with ink on the side of her finger, and the child turning softly beneath her ribs, as if even the baby objected to unfinished arithmetic. Samuel found the pages on the office desk before breakfast. Lydia came downstairs to see him standing over them, one hand braced on the chair back, hair still damp from washing at the pump. He had not put on his hat yet. That small detail made him look less like the man who carried the farm on his shoulders and more like someone caught reading a private letter. "I did not mean for you to find them before I explained," Lydia said. He looked up. "I was not searching." "I know. I only came for the Northfield tally." "I know that too." He glanced down again. "You wrote to 3 buyers." "I drafted letters. I have not sent them. Clearwater County, Red Fork Mills, and a man named Alden Price." "My father mentioned Mr. Price once. He buys for a flour mill farther east. He grades hard, but from what I remember, he grades by sample, not friendship." Samuel's mouth tightened at the word friendship. Mercy Ridge's local grain buyer, Truman Cole, had known Samuel since boyhood. He had bought Whitaker wheat for years, shook Samuel's father's hand many times, and still would pay no more than the grade he chose. That did not make him wicked. It made him a businessman in a town where few farmers could afford to haul grain elsewhere. "Hauling to Clearwater costs money," Samuel said. "Yes." "Red Fork costs more." "Yes." Alden Price may not answer. "That is why there are 3 letters." Samuel read 1 page in silence. Lydia waited. She had expected doubt, not insult perhaps, but resistance. Men who had spent years surviving by endurance did not always welcome help that arrived with ink and careful margins. At last he said, "This is more than names." "It had to be. If I write only to ask whether they will buy, they can ignore me. If I send our expected quantity, damaged portions separated, likely grade, and current local offer, then they must answer a real question. Our expected quantity may still change." "I wrote that." He turned another page. "You also wrote that we can separate lots before hauling." "We can if Abram agrees." A voice from the kitchen doorway said, "Abram agrees to nothing before coffee." The old foreman stood there with his cup in hand, eyes narrowed toward the papers as if they might bite. Danny hovered behind him, trying to read over his shoulder and failing because Abram was wider than he looked. Mrs. Vale pushed past both of them carrying a pan of biscuits. "Either come eat or turn into fence posts. Doorways are for passing through." No one moved. Lydia gathered the pages. "I only mean to make inquiries, nothing more." Abram stepped into the office and held out one rough hand. "Let me see." It was not a request that carried warmth, but it was a request. Lydia gave him the first page. Abram could read well enough, though slowly, lips tightening when a sentence required patience. He leaned near the window for better light. Danny leaned with him until Abram elbowed him back without looking. The kitchen smelled of coffee, hot bread, and the faint smoke Mrs. Vale insisted came from the stove, and not from anything she had done to the biscuits. Abram read the first letter, then the notes attached to it. His thumb stopped on the section where Lydia had listed separate loads by field. "You marked South Rise as best." "Yes." "Creek Field second." "Yes." "North Strip third." "That is what you said after the storm." "I said a lot after the storm. I wrote most of it down." Danny grinned. "Careful, Abram, she keeps records." Abram ignored him. He looked at Samuel. "If we do this, wagons need cleaning between lots, not broom clean, proper. Chaff from damaged heads mixed with sound grain will lower the sample." Samuel nodded. "How long?" "Longer than we want. That is usually the cost of doing things right." Abram looked back at Lydia. "You know buyers may call this fussing." "I expect them to. They may offer only a little more. A little more on the right lot may be enough to ask the bank for time." He studied her then more directly than before. His eyes were pale beneath heavy lids, sharp despite his age. "You are not trying to save pride," he said. "No." "What then?" Lydia looked past him to the kitchen where Mrs. Vale was setting plates on the table, where Danny had already stolen one biscuit and hidden it poorly under a napkin, where Samuel stood beside the desk with the bank letter folded in his hand. "I am trying to save options," she said. Abram held her gaze a moment longer. Then he handed the paper back. "Send the letters." They did. Not all at once, not carelessly. Lydia copied each one in her best hand after breakfast, making the letters respectful but firm. She gave no sob story. She did not mention her condition, her marriage, or the bank beyond what was necessary. She wrote as the working wife of a farm seeking fair inspection for separated wheat lots after partial hail damage. She included figures, field notes, expected quantity, and asked what terms each buyer could offer if samples met grade. Samuel read the final drafts. He changed only one line. Where Lydia had written, "My husband can provide samples upon request," Samuel crossed out "my husband" and wrote, "We can provide samples upon request." She saw it when he passed the page back. The change was small. It was also not small at all. At noon, Danny rode the letters into Mercy Ridge to catch the post. Mrs. Vale packed him bread, cold ham, and an apple, then inspected his collar as if he were leaving for war rather than town. "Don't stop at Hammond's unless you must," she said. "I must if I pass it." "That is not what must means. I may faint from duty. You may faint from nonsense." Abram handed him the reins. "Ride straight, post straight, come straight back." Danny sighed. "No one here trusts my character." "I trust it to wander," Abram said. When Danny left, Lydia watched the road until dust swallowed him. The waiting began. Waiting was harder than writing. Lydia could organize papers, but not the pace of distant men reading them. For 3 days, there was only ordinary work sharpened by uncertainty. Samuel and Abram repaired the old grain bins. Danny painted wagon marks exactly as planned and spent an entire afternoon with red paint on his ear because Mrs. Vale refused to tell him where it was. Lydia cleaned the office shelves and copied the new harvest plan into the ledger. The farm did not become less troubled. It became more deliberate. On the 4th day, the first answer came from Red Fork Mills. No. Not cruelly, not dismissively. Their hauling distance made the quantity unprofitable unless the grade proved higher than Lydia could honestly promise. Samuel read the letter, nodded once, and set it aside. The 5th day brought no answer. The 6th brought Clearwater County. Maybe. They would consider purchase if samples were sent after cutting, and if the lots were kept properly separate. Their price estimate was better than Truman Cole's local offer, but transportation would eat most of the difference unless Samuel could find a cheaper haul arrangement. "Maybe is better than no," Danny said. Abram grunted. "Maybe is no wearing Sunday clothes." Mrs. Vale said, "Let the boy have one cheerful thought before supper." Samuel handed the letter to Lydia. "You were right that someone would answer." "That does not mean enough." "No," he said, "but it means we are not standing before one door." The 7th day brought Alden Price. His answer came in a narrow envelope with a neat hand and no wasted phrasing. He would be passing within 15 miles of Mercy Ridge in early August to inspect grain for another farm. If Whitaker Farm could provide separated samples, clearly marked by field, he would examine them. He would not promise a price before grading. He would not buy damaged lots above their worth. But he did pay properly for sound wheat, and he preferred farmers who understood the difference. Lydia read the last line twice. Samuel stood beside her in the office, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him without being touched. "Well," he asked. She handed him the letter. He read it once, then again. Outside, Abram was hammering bin boards into place. Danny was singing something tuneless near the wagon shed until Abram told him every crow in the county would file a complaint. Mrs. Vale was snapping beans on the porch, pretending not to listen through the open window. Samuel looked at Lydia. 15 miles. He may come if samples are ready. If he likes them. If they deserve liking. His expression softened at the edge. That sounds like Abram. Then it must be sensible. He set the letter on the desk. For a moment, neither spoke. Lydia wanted badly to believe this was rescue. It was not. The damaged wheat remained damaged. The banknote remained due. A better buyer could still reject them. A wagon axle could break. Weather could turn again. Hope on a farm was never safe enough to hold with both hands. But it was there. Small, plain, real. That evening, the household gathered in the barn to inspect the bins. The west bin had been swept, patched, and marked for South Rise. The middle bin was for Creek Field. The smallest was for North Strip and damaged heads that might still be useful for feed. Danny had painted the marks neatly on each bin door, though one circle had dripped and looked slightly like a lopsided egg. "It has character," Danny said. "It has a disease," Abram replied. Mrs. Vale stood with her hands on her hips. "If the wheat knows where to go, I care nothing for the art." Lydia walked slowly between the bins, one hand at her back. The air smelled of old grain, dust, sun-warmed boards, and fresh paint. Samuel walked near her, but not too near. Abram stopped by the west bin. He placed one hand on the door. "Best wheat goes here," he said. "No shortcuts, no mixing, no tired dumping after dark because a man wants supper. If Mrs. Whitaker says a tally is off, it is off until proved otherwise." Danny looked delighted by the formality of it. "Does that mean she outranks me?" "Chickens outrank you when they show sense." Mrs. Vale laughed outright. Lydia looked at Abram, surprised by the warmth rising in her chest. He did not smile, but he did not look away either. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me, keep the pencil sharp." Samuel glanced at the old man, then at Lydia. Something quiet passed through his face, something proud enough that she had to look toward the bin door. As they left the barn, Lydia noticed pale curls of wood under a cloth at the far workbench. Samuel moved slightly, blocking the sight without seeming to, not secretive in a guilty way, protective. She let him have the secret. The cradle could wait. The farm could not. Over the next week, every person on Whitaker Farm changed their work because of those letters. Abram watched the fields with harsher care. Danny practiced hitching the wagons in the order they would be needed. Mrs. Vale began saving sacks and marking them by lot. Samuel rode to speak with a neighbor about sharing haul costs to Clearwater if it came to that. Lydia wrote, copied, counted, and made the harvest plan clean enough that even a tired man could follow it by lantern light. No one said she had saved anything. That would have been too large and too false. She had found one narrow bridge. Others would have to carry weight across it. On the last night of July, Lydia stayed late in the office balancing projected yield against hauling cost. Her ankles ached. The baby pressed uncomfortably when she leaned too long over the desk. She rubbed her back and closed her eyes for a moment. A cup appeared beside her hand. Milk warmed with a little nutmeg. She looked up. Samuel stood there, hat in hand, as if embarrassed by having entered his own office. "Mrs. Vale said you forget when you are working. She says many things. She is right about most of them." Lydia took the cup. "Did she send you?" "Yes." Samuel paused. "Then no." Lydia smiled before she could stop herself. He saw it. For the first time, his own smile came fully enough to change his face. It was brief and almost shy and gone quickly, but it had been there. He looked at the papers on the desk. "Are we still ruined?" "Not tonight. That is a generous estimate. It is the best I can do after milk with nutmeg." He leaned one shoulder against the doorframe. "Then I will take it." The office lamp burned between them. Outside, the farm settled under a sky clear of storm. In the barn, bins waited. In the fields, damaged wheat and sound wheat grew side by side, each soon to be judged for what it truly was. Lydia wrapped both hands around the warm cup. Samuel did not touch her. He did not need to. For the first time since she had married him, the silence between them felt less like caution and more like company. Alden Price arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in a black traveling coat, carrying a leather sample bag and the expression of a man who trusted grain more than people. He did not come alone. A younger clerk rode beside him, thin-faced and nervous, with spectacles that kept sliding down his nose each time the wagon hit a rut. Danny later said the clerk looked like a pencil that had learned to sit upright. Mrs. Vale told him not to be unkind, then admitted privately that he was not entirely wrong. Samuel met the men in the yard. Lydia watched from the porch, one hand resting at the small of her back. The baby had grown heavier in the last weeks, and the late summer heat made even standing feel like a negotiation. She had wanted to meet Mr. Price in the yard with Samuel, but Samuel had quietly placed a chair near the porch rail before the wagon arrived. He had said nothing. The chair said enough. Alden Price stepped down, dusted one sleeve, and looked over the farm with quick, measuring eyes. He was not rude. He simply wasted no warmth on strangers. "Mr. Whitaker." "Yes." "Mrs. Whitaker wrote the letters." Samuel turned toward the porch. "She did." Price removed his hat. "Ma'am." Lydia inclined her head. "Mr. Price, thank you for coming. I came because your letter had figures in it. Most requests have pleading." His eyes moved toward the barns. Figures can still lie, but they usually lie in a more useful way. Abram, standing near the wagon shed, gave a grunt that might have been approval. Samuel led the men toward the west bin first. Lydia rose to follow, but Mrs. Vale appeared from nowhere and set a hand on the chair back. "Do not make me embarrass you in front of buyers," she said softly. "I only want to hear." "Then hear from Shade." Lydia sat again, though she did not like it. She watched the men enter the barn. Samuel first, then Price and the clerk, then Abram with the slow authority of a man who believed the barn belonged to him more honestly than paperwork could prove. Danny followed with 2 tin cups and a scoop, trying to look professional and only partly succeeding. The waiting was almost worse than the hail. The house seemed to hold its breath. Mrs. Vale snapped beans in a bowl beside Lydia, but after a while she stopped pretending to work. The only sounds were the creak of the barn door, the low voices inside, and the dry whisper of wheat being poured from one container into another. Lydia thought of every mark in the ledger, every wagon cleaned between loads, every sack tied and labeled, every argument with hauling cost, every time Abram had corrected her and she had written the correction down instead of defending herself. Every night Samuel had come in too tired to speak and still sat with her long enough to answer questions about field, yield, weight, and price. This was not her plan anymore. That was the strange comfort of it. It had begun on her pages, but it had become everyone's work. When the men came out of the barn, Lydia knew nothing from Samuel's face. He had returned to that guarded stillness which hid both hope and disappointment under the same roof. Alden Price wiped his hands with a cloth. "The South Rise lot is better than I expected after hail." Abram's head lifted a fraction. Price continued, "Not perfect, I do not buy wishes, but it is sound wheat, clean enough, good weight. The creek field is fair if milled separately. North strip is thin, as you said. Damaged lot is feed grade and should not be sold as anything else." "That is how we marked it," Lydia said. Price looked at her more sharply then, as if remembering the woman on the porch was not decoration. "Yes," he said, "it is." Samuel stood beside the barn door, hat in his hands. "Will you make an offer?" "I will make 2. One for the South Rise and Creek field together, priced separately by grade. One for the lot as a whole if you want speed over precision." "Precision," Abram said before Samuel could answer. Samuel glanced at him. Abram folded his arms. "Speed already cost us once." Price's mouth moved in what might have been a smile. "Your foreman has sense." "Too much according to some," Danny muttered. Mrs. Vale did not look at him. "Daniel Bell, do not narrate business." The clerk spread papers on the porch table because the office was too small and too warm. Lydia joined them then despite Mrs. Vale's look. Samuel pulled the chair closer himself and waited until she sat before taking his place at the table. Price wrote the offer in clean numbers. Lydia read them once. Then again. The price was not miraculous. It did not wipe away the bank note. It did not make the hail a memory or the lost acreage rise from the mud. But it was better than Truman Cole's offer by enough to change the shape of September. With the South Rise graded properly and the Creek field sold separately, Samuel could make a payment large enough to approach the bank without looking like a man asking charity. Not enough to be free, enough to ask for time. Sometimes time was the only mercy a farm needed. Samuel looked at Lydia. She kept her voice calm because too much hope spoken carelessly could frighten itself away. If hauling is shared with the Miller place as you discussed, and if we sell the feed lot locally, this leaves a shortfall, but not a fatal one. How short? Samuel asked. She turned the paper and pointed. Abram leaned over her shoulder, close enough that months ago she would have stiffened. Now she only moved the pencil so he could see. We can make that up, Abram said. Not easy, but we can. Danny straightened. I can take Hammond's hauling work after the wheat is moved. Samuel started to object. Danny raised both hands. Not to pay for the storm, to earn my own winter coat before Mrs. Vale makes me wear the brown one with the sleeve patch again. Mrs. Vale sniffed. That coat has character. That coat has history older than me. It has warmth. It has shame. Even Price's nervous clerk smiled at that. Samuel looked from Danny to Abram, then to Lydia. He seemed to understand, perhaps for the first time in full, that they did not want to be protected from the farm's hardship as if they were children. They wanted to stand under it with him. All right, Samuel said quietly. After the wheat is moved, not before. Danny nodded, trying not to look pleased and failing. Price signed the offer. Samuel signed after him. Lydia witnessed the figures, not because the law required her name, but because Samuel slid the paper toward her and set the pen down beside it. You should mark it in the ledger, he said. Price watched the exchange without comment. Abram watched too. So did Mrs. Vale. Lydia took the pen. Her hand did not tremble. She wrote the sale terms in the new ledger in the section she had made for harvest agreements. Samuel's signature sat on the contract. Her handwriting held the record. Abram's field marks had protected the lots. Danny's wagon paint had kept the hauling straight. Mrs. Vale's sack labels had saved them from confusion when men were too tired to think. No single hand had saved the farm. That truth sat at the table with them, like another member of the household. When Price left, he took the first sealed samples with him and promised the final purchase once the full loads reached the mill road. He did not offer praise. Men like him seemed to consider praise an expensive habit. But before climbing into his wagon, he turned to Lydia. Mrs. Whitaker. Yes. You wrote a better business letter than most men twice your age. Lydia felt heat rise in her face. I wrote what was needed. That is often what makes it better. Then he was gone, the clerk beside him, the wagon wheels cutting through dust at the edge of the yard. For a long while after, nobody moved. Then Danny whooped so suddenly the chickens scattered. Abram slapped the back of his head, not hard. You will sour the milk with that noise. I will sweeten it with joy. You will muck stalls with joy. Mrs. Vale laughed and wiped her eyes with the corner of her apron, pretending dust had gotten to them though no dust had reached the porch. Samuel remained at the table, one hand resting on the offer sheet. Lydia sat beside him. The space between them had grown smaller over the summer, not in inches perhaps, but in all the ways that mattered. He no longer seemed startled to find her near him. She no longer felt the need to make herself smaller when he entered a room. Still, neither of them crossed the lines they had drawn at the beginning. Some promises became walls. Others became fences with gates. This one, Lydia was beginning to understand, had protected something tender long enough for it to grow. That night the household ate supper outside beneath the cottonwood because Mrs. Vale said good news deserved air. The meal was simple: beans, cornbread, fried apples, and the last jar of peaches she had been saving for a reason no one had known until she decided this was it. Danny told the story of the clerk's spectacles falling into the sample bag 3 times, though it had happened only once. Abram corrected him twice, then stopped because the story was better wrong. Mrs. Vale fussed over Lydia's plate until Lydia threatened to begin fussing over hers. Samuel listened more than he spoke, but the hard line between his brows had eased. After supper, Abram stood and cleared his throat. That alone made Danny sit straighter. The old foreman looked uncomfortable, which made the moment more serious. "I have known this land since Samuel's father had more hair than sense," Abram said. "I have watched good seasons make fools proud and bad seasons make honest men quiet. This year tried to take both wheat and courage." He paused, eyes moving toward Lydia. "When Mrs. Whitaker first came here, I figured she was trouble we had not earned. That was my mistake." Lydia went still. Abram looked down at his hat, turning it once in his hands. "She did not ask us to carry her. She picked up the part she could carry and made the rest of us carry ours better." No one teased him. Not even Danny. Abram put his hat back on. That is all. But it was not all. Because it was the first time he had spoken her married name with no stiffness in it, no distance, no guarded edge. Mrs. Whitaker, not as a courtesy, as a fact. Lydia looked away toward the field, because her eyes had filled faster than she could command them. Samuel saw. He did not speak. He only reached across the table and moved the peach bowl closer to her, a small useless gesture that gave her a reason to lower her face. Later, after the dishes were carried in and Danny had been ordered to stop celebrating near the horses, Lydia stood alone at the porch rail. The evening had cooled at last. Fireflies blinked low over the grass. From the barn came the quiet scrape of wood again, faint and careful. Samuel joined her with 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to her and leaned against the rail, leaving his shoulder near hers but not touching. "You heard Abram," he said. "I did. He does not apologize often." That was an apology. For Abram, that was a speech, a hymn, and a public weeping. Lydia laughed softly. Samuel turned his cup in both hands. He was right. "About which part?" "All of it." The barn sound continued in the dark. Lydia looked toward it. "You work late these nights." Samuel followed her gaze. His face shifted, and for a moment she thought he might deny it. Instead he said, "Some things take longer when a man wants them done properly." "The bins?" "No." She waited. He did not explain. But he did not turn away either. That was enough for now. Inside the house, Mrs. Vale began humming while she put away plates. Danny laughed at something Abram pretended not to find amusing. The new ledger lay open in the office with the grain offer pressed carefully between its pages. The bank still had to be faced. The debt still had teeth. But that evening, Whitaker Farm felt less like a place bracing for loss, and more like a house learning how to breathe again. Lydia stood beside Samuel in the warm dark, listening to the sounds of the family she had not meant to find. And for the first time, she wondered whether shelter had become too small a word for what this place was becoming. By September, Lydia could no longer hide the child beneath careful dresses and straight posture. Not that she tried much anymore. There had been a time before Whitaker Farm when every change in her body felt like evidence town eyes might use against her. She had stood before mirrors with dread, turned sideways, held fabric loose, and wondered how long dignity could survive beneath inspection. In her father's house, she had felt herself becoming a secret everyone was trying to manage. At the farm, no one let her become a secret. Mrs. Vale made her larger aprons without ceremony and added pockets deep enough for pencil stubs, folded notes, and peppermint drops for the queasy spells that still came without warning. Danny began moving chairs into places before Lydia reached them, then pretending he had simply changed his mind about where chairs belonged. Abram scolded her if she stood too near the barn door when wagons came through. but he scolded Danny twice as hard for leaving a rake where she might trip. Samuel said the least. He also did the most quietly. The firewood appeared stacked nearer the kitchen door. The office chair gained a cushion she had not asked for. A rail beside the back steps, loose for years according to Mrs. Vale, was tightened and sanded smooth. A lantern was left burning at the top of the stairs every night, though no one ever admitted who lit it. Lydia knew. She had stopped thanking him for every small care because thanks made Samuel retreat, as if praise were a room too crowded for comfort. Instead, she began answering in her own way. His coffee cup waited on the office desk when he came in to review figures after supper. His torn gloves were mended before he noticed the split. The September bank plan was copied cleanly, with every receipt tied in date order, and the grain contract placed beneath the bank letter where no man could pretend not to find it. The farm had earned its breathing room. Samuel had ridden to the bank in Mercy Ridge with the payment in his coat and Abram's silent company beside him. Lydia had watched them leave from the porch, her hands folded around the rail until Mrs. Vale told her wood did not need strangling. They returned late in the afternoon, both dusty, both tired, neither smiling. But Samuel held a folded paper in his hand. An extension. 6 months. Not freedom, not safety forever, but time purchased honestly with wheat saved from damage, figures kept straight, hauling arranged with care, and pride swallowed just enough to keep a home standing. Danny had whooped again. Abram had not stopped him this time. Mrs. Vale had cried over the stove and blamed onion fumes, though supper contained no onions. That night, Lydia wrote the extension date into the ledger. Samuel stood behind her chair, reading over her shoulder. March, she said. March, he answered. It will come quickly. Most hard things do. She turned the pen between her fingers, but we have winter to plan. We, Samuel repeated. It was only one word, but it warmed the room more than the lamp. After that, the household changed in a way no one announced. They still worked hard. They still worried. Abram still complained about waste, weather, and Danny's singing. Mrs. Vale still ruled the kitchen with the calm force of a general. Samuel still carried more weight than any man should carry alone, though perhaps no longer quite alone. But Lydia felt less like a guest with usefulness, and more like one of the people whose absence would leave a hole. One afternoon, Abram brought the harvest tally book into the office and set it on her desk. South Rye's final count, he said. Lydia looked up. You already wrote it. Rough, needs your hand before Samuel reads it and decides numbers are suggestions. I heard that, Samuel said from the hall. You were meant to, Abram replied. Lydia took the book. Abram remained standing there, hat in his hands, shifting his weight off his bad knee. Is there something else? She asked. He looked at the ledger shelf, then at the window, then at the floor. Baby's room faces east. Lydia's hand stilled. Yes. Morning sun can be sharp. I found old sacking in the loft. Could make a shade for the window if Mrs. Vale has cloth to cover it proper. He said it like a repair suggestion, as if the child were another part of the farm needing practical preparation. That made it dearer, not less. I think that would help, Lydia said. Abram nodded once and left quickly, as if kindness were whether he preferred not to be caught standing in. Lydia sat very still after he went. Samuel came into the office and watched the doorway where Abram had disappeared. He asked about the baby's window, Lydia said. I heard. He did not call it the spare room. No. Their eyes met. Neither spoke of what that meant. They had both learned that some changes were too tender to point at directly. The cradle was not one of those changes, though Samuel seemed determined to pretend it was still hidden. Lydia saw more of it by accident, or perhaps by the kind of accident a person chooses. The barn door stood open one evening after supper, and the sun fell low enough to reach the workbench. The curved pine pieces she had glimpsed weeks before had become something nearly whole. 2 rockers leaned against the bench. Smooth slats formed a small sleeping place, pale and carefully sanded. Along the side, Samuel had carved a simple line of wheat heads bending in wind. She stopped in the doorway. Samuel stood with his back to her, running a cloth over the wood. He turned when he heard her step. For one suspended moment, he looked like a boy caught stealing preserves. "I was going to bring it in when it was done," he said. "It looks done." "It is." "What is left?" He looked down at the cradle. "I don't know." That answer broke something open in her, softly. Lydia stepped inside. The barn smelled of hay, leather, pine shavings, and the sweet dust of stored grain. Evening light rested across Samuel's sleeves. Wood curls lay around his boots, proof of many nights he had worked when she thought he was checking tools or bins. She came close enough to touch the cradle, then paused. "May I?" Samuel nodded. Her fingers moved along the carved wheat. The wood was smooth as river stone. "It is beautiful," she said. "It is plain. Plain things can be beautiful when they are made with care." His eyes stayed on the cradle. "I started it before I knew what I was doing." "I know." He looked at her then. She had not meant to say so much, but the words had already crossed the space between them. "I saw you one night," she said, "weeks ago." Samuel exhaled slowly, almost a laugh. "I thought I was being secretive." "You are better with repairs than secrets." That earned the faintest smile. Then it faded. "I meant what I told you in April," he said. "I did not want to lie to you. I did not know whether I could feel what a father should feel." Lydia's hand rested on the cradle rail. "And now?" He looked toward the open barn door, where the fields lay gold and tired after harvest. "Now I worry whether I will fail at it." The honesty in that answer struck her harder than any declaration would have. "I worry every day," she said. "You?" "I worry I will not know what to do when the baby cries. I worry people will look at the child and see my mistake before they see its face. I worry that one day you will grow tired of being kind to what you did not ask for." Samuel's face tightened. He stepped closer, then stopped, holding himself at the edge of the boundary he had made for her. "Lydia," he said quietly, "I have been tired of many things in my life. Whether debt, broken machinery, my own pride, I am not tired of being kind to you." She looked down because her eyes had filled. "And the child?" she asked. Samuel took time with the answer. She loved him a little for not rushing it. "I do not know what name feeling takes before a baby is born," he said. "But I know this. When I think of winter, I think of keeping that room warm. When I pass the mercantile, I look at soft cloth and pretend I am only pricing nails. When Danny speaks too loud near you, I want to throw him in the water trough. And when I built this, I did not think of another man." His voice roughened. "I thought of a child sleeping safe in my house." Lydia pressed her lips together. Outside, Danny laughed at something near the corral, and Abram told him laughter did not mend harness. Mrs. Vale called from the kitchen that if people wanted pie, they could stop hovering in barns like owls. Samuel and Lydia remained beside the cradle. The space between them seemed smaller than it had ever been. Lydia lifted her hand from the wood, and after a moment's hesitation, placed it gently over Samuel's hand where it rested on the cradle rail. He went still. She felt the strength in his fingers, the roughness of his knuckles, the careful way he did not close his hand too quickly around hers. Then slowly, he turned his palm and held her hand. Nothing more. No kiss, no spoken vow, no sudden sweep of feeling that made the past vanish. Just two people standing in a barn beside a cradle built before either of them had dared say what it meant. But Lydia knew. So did Samuel. If this quiet change in their household touched you, leave a like and stay with their story. On the frontier, love did not always arrive with music. Sometimes it came in the scrape of a hand playing, a warm lamp upstairs, and a man learning to make room before he knew how to say why. That evening, the cradle came into the house. Danny carried one end and Samuel the other. while Abram supervised as if the thing weighed 400 pounds and required military planning. "Not against that wall," Mrs. Vale said from the hall. "Draft comes under the door." "By the window?" Danny asked. "Morning sun." "Abram has cloth for that," Lydia said. Abram glared at the floor. "Maybe." They tried the parlor first, then the corner near the stairs, then the upstairs room. Somehow, by the end of it, the cradle rested in the front hallway, not because it belonged there, but because everyone had grown tired and no one truly wanted it out of sight. Abram caught his boot on one rocker before supper. "This is a foolish place for a cradle," he said. "Then move it," Danny replied. Abram looked at the cradle, then at Lydia, then at Samuel. He grunted and stepped around it. No one moved it. That night, Lydia stood at the top of the stairs after everyone had gone quiet. The hallway lamp burned low. The cradle sat below, pale in the dimness, inconvenient and lovely. Samuel stood near it, one hand on the rail, looking down into the empty space where a child would soon sleep. He did not know she was watching. Softly, too softly for anyone but the house to hear, he said, "You take your time coming. We'll be ready." Lydia pressed one hand over her mouth. The baby shifted beneath her other palm, slow and sure. And for the first time, she did not think of the child as a question Samuel still had to answer. She thought of it as someone already being waited for. The baby came on a cold October night while rain tapped softly against the upstairs windows, and the whole farm smelled of wet leaves, lamp oil, and wood smoke. Lydia woke first to a deep ache that pulled her from sleep before she knew why. For a moment she lay still in the dark, one hand spread over the tight curve of her belly, listening to Samuel move in the room across the hall. The floorboard outside her door no longer creaked, but she had learned the sound of him anyway. A chair shifted. A boot touched the floor. He must have been awake already. Then the pain came again. Not sharp enough to frighten her at first, strong enough to make her grip the quilt. She breathed through it the way Mrs. Vale had taught her, slow and steady, though there was nothing steady in her heart. When it passed, she swung her feet to the floor and reached for her wrapper. The door across the hall opened before she reached her own. Samuel stood there in his shirt sleeves, hair rumpled from sleep, face already alert. "Lydia." She pressed one hand to the doorframe. "I think it is time." For half a second, all the color left his face. Then he became motion. Not panic. Samuel did not spend fear loudly. He lit the hall lamp, called for Mrs. Vale, and reached Lydia before she could object to being helped. His hand hovered near her elbow. "May I?" She nodded. He held her carefully, as if she were strong and breakable at the same time. Somehow that was exactly right. Mrs. Vale came from her room with her gray braid over one shoulder and a shawl thrown crookedly around her. She took one look at Lydia and became calm in the way older women become calm when younger ones need permission to be afraid. "Samuel, send Danny for Mrs. Calder," she said. "Abram can saddle faster with that bad knee than the boy can think, but the boy can ride harder. Wake both." Samuel was already moving. Within minutes, the house filled with quiet urgency. Danny stumbled down the stairs with one boot on and one in his hand, hair standing wild. Abram met him at the back door fully dressed, as if he had been expecting trouble all his life and had only been waiting for it to choose a night. "Midwife," Abram said, shoving Danny's coat at him. "No racing the creek bend. Road slick. If that horse comes back lathered and you don't, I'll haunt you living." "I can ride," Danny said, pale but determined. "Then ride smart." The door opened. Rain and cold rushed in. Then Danny was gone into the dark, hoofbeats striking the yard, fading toward the road. Samuel returned to the bedroom doorway and stopped there. Mrs. Vale had already guided Lydia back to bed and was tying on a clean apron. She turned and pointed at him. "You wait downstairs until called." Samuel looked past her to Lydia. Lydia tried to smile. It failed, but he saw the effort. "I will be here," he said. "I know." That was all there was time for. The door closed. Downstairs, Samuel stood in the kitchen as if the house had become a place he no longer knew how to inhabit. He picked up the coffee pot, set it down empty, then filled it and forgot to put it on the stove. He took 2 steps toward the stairs, stopped, and turned back. Outside, rain ran from the porch roof in silver threads. Abram sat at the table with a harness strap that needed no mending. He drew it through his hands again and again, inspecting the same buckle like it held the answer to all human suffering. "You pacing won't bring daylight quicker," Abram said. Samuel stopped mid-step. "I was not pacing. You wore a path between stove and hall in 5 minutes." Samuel looked toward the stairs. A low sound came from above, not loud but unmistakably Lydia's pain. His hands closed once at his sides. Abram's voice softened, though only slightly. "She has Ruth Vale in there. Mrs. Calder is not here yet. She will be. If Danny reaches her. He will. If the road—" "Samuel," Abram set the useless harness strap down. "Sit before I nail your boots to the floor." Samuel did not sit. Abram sighed and picked the strap up again. The midwife arrived after what felt like a year and was likely less than an hour. Mrs. Calder came in wrapped in a dark cloak, rain shining on her bonnet, carrying a worn black bag and wearing the expression of a woman who had delivered babies through blizzards, droughts, feuds, and foolish husbands. Danny followed behind her, soaked through and proud enough to forget he was shivering. Mrs. Calder looked Samuel over once. "You the husband?" "Yes." "Good, stay out of the way until someone says otherwise." Then she went upstairs. Danny dropped into a chair. "She rides faster than I do." Abram grunted. "Most women with purpose do." The hours stretched. Coffee went cold, then hot again, then cold again. Mrs. Vale came down twice, once for more hot water, once for clean cloths. Both times Samuel stood before she reached the bottom stair. Both times she told him Lydia was doing as she should. That answer was meant to comfort him. It did not. Near midnight, the rain stopped. The house became too quiet between sounds. Danny fell asleep with his head on his folded arms, woke at Lydia's next cry, and pretended he had only been resting his eyes. Abram put wood on the stove 3 times, though the room was already warm. Samuel stood near the hallway, one hand on the wall. Above him was the woman he had married because there had been no better option on the table. The woman who had reorganized his failing books, faced town whispers with a lifted chin, made Abram Pike admit he had been wrong without using those words, and brought light into rooms Samuel had not known had gone dim. The woman he loved. He had not told her yet. Not properly. The realization was not new, but the fear around it was. He thought of all the careful months, all the promises made to protect her from being claimed too soon, and wondered whether caution had become another kind of cowardice. What if she knew his respect but not his heart? What if she mistook restraint for distance? What if the first thing the child taught him was that waiting too long could be its own failure? Another sound came from upstairs. Samuel bowed his head. Abram rose then and came to stand beside him. For once, the old man did not pretend to have a task. "Women have carried the world through worse nights than this," Abram said. Samuel's voice was rough. "That does not make this one easier." "No." They stood shoulder to shoulder in the hall, saying nothing more. Just before dawn, the first cry came. It was thin, furious, alive. Danny shot upright so fast his chair scraped across the floor. Abram froze with one hand still against the wall. Samuel did not move at all for one heartbeat, as if the sound had passed through him and turned every bone to light. Then he looked up. A few moments later, Mrs. Vale opened the bedroom door. Her face was pale with tiredness and wet with tears she would deny later. "A boy," she called softly. "A strong one. Lydia is well." Samuel gripped the stair rail. Mrs. Vale's mouth trembled into a smile. "Come up slow." He did. Each step felt like crossing into a life that had already begun without asking whether he was ready. The bedroom was warm, lamplit, and quiet after the long storm of labor. Mrs. Calder stood by the basin, washing her hands. Mrs. Vale hovered near the bed with the proud exhaustion of someone who had personally argued a child into the world. Lydia lay against the pillows, her hair loose and dark with sweat at her temples, her face pale, worn, and more beautiful to Samuel than any peaceful thing he had ever seen. In her arms lay the baby. Small, wrapped tight, red-faced from outrage, a dark wisp of hair lay damp against his head. Lydia looked at Samuel. The room seemed to wait with her. "Would you like to hold him?" she asked. Samuel stepped closer, then stopped. "Are you sure?" Her tired smile deepened. "I am." Mrs. Vale helped place the baby in his arms because Samuel suddenly had no confidence in hands that had handled horses, tools, axes, reins, and broken machinery. The child weighed almost nothing and everything. Samuel held him stiffly at first, afraid of every angle. Then the baby's fist worked free from the blanket. Tiny fingers opened, trembled, and closed around Samuel's rough forefinger. A sound left Samuel that was not speech. Lydia watched him, eyes bright. "He has a strong grip," Samuel said, because it was the only sentence he could manage. "He will need one," Mrs. Vale said from behind him, wiping her face with her apron. "Born into this house." Samuel looked down at the child. Not his blood. Not his making. Not the promise he had expected to carry when he first stood in the yard before Judge Harrow. But the baby's fist held him with blind trust, and Samuel understood in that breath that fatherhood had not waited for blood to approve it. It had arrived in a warm bundle before dawn and taken hold of one finger. "What will you call him?" Mrs. Calder asked. Lydia looked at Samuel. "We had not chosen," she said. Samuel's eyes lifted to hers. "You should." "I want us to." "Us." The word entered the room like the first sunlight at the window. Samuel looked back at the baby. He thought of the fields after hail, bending but not gone. He thought of the creek that ran shallow but kept running. He thought of Lydia walking through his front door when every easier thing in life had closed behind her. "Elias," he said quietly, "if you wish for your father, he made mistakes, but he also brought you here." Lydia's face changed, grief and forgiveness moving through it together. "And his second name?" she asked. Samuel shook his head. "You choose." "Thomas," she said, "for your father." He looked at her then. She had never met Thomas Whitaker. She knew him only through the farm, through Samuel's silences, through Abram's stories, through the way old tools were kept longer than usefulness because hands once loved had held them. "Elias Thomas Whitaker," Mrs. Vale said, testing it aloud. The name settled gently over the room. Samuel looked down at the baby again. Elias had stopped crying. His fist still held Samuel's finger with stubborn command. "You hear that?" Samuel murmured, so low only Lydia caught it. "You have a name now." The baby made a small sound, more complaint than agreement. Samuel smiled. "Not almost. Not briefly. Fully." Lydia saw it and began to cry without shame. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed beside her, Elias between them. With his free hand, he reached for Lydia's. This time he did not stop halfway. This time she did not have to wonder whether the choice was hers. She opened her fingers and he held them. "I was afraid," he said quietly. "So was I. I still am. So am I." The truth did not frighten her as much when spoken together. Outside the window, morning had begun to gray the sky above the wet fields. Downstairs, Danny whispered too loudly, asking if babies looked like potatoes at first or only this one. Abram told him if he valued his teeth, he would not repeat that where Mrs. Vale could hear. Mrs. Vale heard and shouted down that potatoes had more sense than both of them. Lydia laughed through her tears. Samuel looked at the door, then at the baby, then back at her. For the first time since their marriage began, the room did not feel divided by bargain, shame, duty, or fear. It held all of those things somewhere in its past, but they no longer stood at the center. At the center was a child. At the center was Lydia's hand in his. At the center was Samuel Whitaker, holding a son he had not made, and already could not imagine putting down. Later, when Mrs. Vale insisted Lydia sleep and Mrs. Calder ordered everyone out, Samuel carried Elias downstairs. He moved slowly, awkwardly, with the grave attention of a man transporting glass through a storm. Danny stood when he saw them. His face had gone soft with wonder. "He is small," Danny whispered. "He is new," Abram said. Samuel placed Elias in the cradle in the front hallway. The baby stirred, frowned, and kicked once beneath the blanket. The cradle rocked gently. Everyone watched. Abram cleared his throat. "Rockers sit level." Samuel glanced at him. "That means you built it right," Abram added gruffly. Mrs. Vale, coming down the stairs, touched the cradle rail with one hand. Of course he did. Elias made another small sound. Samuel reached down, not thinking, and laid one finger against the baby's fist again. The tiny hand closed around him at once. Danny grinned. "He knows you." Samuel did not answer quickly. When he did, his voice was quiet enough that only those nearest heard. "I hope he will." But Lydia, watching from the stair landing where she had come despite being told to rest, knew better. The child already had. For the first 2 weeks after Elias was born, Whitaker Farm moved in whispers. Not because the baby slept well. He did not. He objected to night as if darkness had personally wronged him. He objected to being laid down too soon, to being wrapped too tightly, to being wrapped too loosely, to the cradle when he wanted arms, and to arms when he wanted motion. Still, the household whispered around him as if soft voices might teach him mercy. They did not. Danny learned this first. He leaned over the cradle one morning while Lydia rested on the parlor settee and said in his gentlest voice, "You are a fine little fellow, Elias." The baby screwed up his face and wailed. Danny stepped back, wounded. "He hates compliments." Abram, passing through with firewood, said, "He hates foolishness, shows promise." Mrs. Vale took Elias from the cradle with the ease of long practice. "He hates being discussed like a calf at market. Come here, little man." Elias stopped crying against her shoulder. Danny looked betrayed. That was favoritism. "That was skill," Mrs. Vale said. Lydia smiled from the settee, too tired to laugh properly. Her body still felt like it belonged partly to pain and partly to the child who had left it. Mrs. Calder had ordered rest. Mrs. Vale enforced it. Samuel obeyed it so sternly on Lydia's behalf that she sometimes wished to throw a pillow at him. He would not let her carry laundry. He would not let her stand long enough to peel potatoes. When she reached for the ledger on the third day, he took it from the shelf and placed it on the table beside her, then added a pencil, ink, receipts, and a cup of tea, as if provisioning a woman for a long journey. "I am not helpless," she said. "I know. You behave as if I might break. You have been through a great deal. So have you. No one has taken your boots away." He glanced toward the door. Mrs. Vale tried. Lydia laughed then, and the sound startled them both because it came out light. Samuel's care had changed since Elias arrived. Before, it had been careful, respectful, always leaving space for her to choose. It still was, but now there was something less guarded beneath it. He entered rooms with less hesitation. He looked at the baby with open wonder when he thought no one saw. He asked Lydia what she needed, and when she answered nothing, he no longer believed her without evidence. At night when Elias cried, Samuel often rose first. The first time Lydia woke to find him gone, panic took her before sense could. She sat up too quickly, heart racing, then heard the low murmur from downstairs. She followed the sound to the landing. Samuel walked slow circles in the front room, Elias held against his shoulder, one broad hand spread across the baby's back. The cradle sat empty near the hall where everyone still stumbled around it and no one moved it. The lamp burned low. Samuel's hair stood unevenly from sleep, and his feet were bare against the cold floorboards. He was humming. It was not a tune Lydia knew. It may not have been a tune at all, but Elias had stopped crying. His small face rested against Samuel's shirt, angry mouth softened in sleep. Samuel looked down at him. "You and I need an understanding," he whispered. "Your mother requires rest, and I require you to believe that." Elias made a small sound. Samuel nodded gravely. "I accept your objection." Lydia pressed one hand over her mouth and went back to bed before he saw her. By the end of the third week, Judge Harrow came to visit. He arrived with Lydia's stepmother, Margaret, who brought a basket full of soft flannel, preserved pears, and enough concern to fill the wagon twice. Margaret cried the moment she saw Elias. She cried again when Lydia placed him in her arms. Then she cried a third time because the baby yawned. Judge Harrow did not cry. He removed his hat in the hallway and stood very still, looking at his daughter, then at the child, then at Samuel. His face held the careful composure of a man who had spent years keeping judgment out of his expression and now wished he had practiced tenderness instead. "He is a fine boy," the judge said. Lydia heard the roughness beneath the words. "His name is Elias Thomas." Her father looked at her sharply. "For you," she said, "and for Samuel's father." Judge Harrow's mouth opened, then closed. He looked down at the baby in Margaret's arms, and for a moment all his authority left him. "I do not deserve that kindness," he said. Samuel, standing near the doorway, answered quietly, "Deserving is not always the measure." The judge looked at him then. Something passed between the two men that Lydia could not fully read. The visit lasted 2 days. Margaret helped Mrs. Vale with cooking and baby clothes, though Mrs. Vale only allowed help after determining Margaret could be trusted not to fold linens foolishly. Danny showed Judge Harrow the marked grain bins with the pride of a boy displaying a fort. Abram gave the judge a tour of the repaired fencing and spoke mostly in grunts, which Judge Harrow accepted with courtroom patience. But Lydia saw her father watching Samuel. He watched Samuel lift Elias when the baby fussed. He watched him bring Lydia broth before she asked. He watched him step around the cradle in the hall without complaint, though he struck his shin on it once hard enough to make Danny wince. He watched him ask Lydia where she wanted the winter supply figures recorded, not whether she felt well enough to trouble herself with them. On the second evening, after supper, Judge Harrow asked Samuel to walk with him to the porch. Lydia sat inside by the parlor fire with Elias drowsing in her arms. The window was open a crack because Mrs. Vale claimed fresh air strengthened babies. Through it, Lydia could hear the men's voices, low but clear enough when the wind paused. "I owe you more than thanks," her father said. Samuel answered, "No. You do not know what I meant to say." "I know enough to say no." A silence followed. Then Judge Harrow spoke again, quieter. "When I came to you, I told myself I was protecting her. That was true, but it was not the whole truth. I was protecting my own name too, my place in town, my pride as a father who thought he had raised a daughter beyond harm." Lydia closed her eyes. Elias shifted against her, his tiny fist pressing into the fabric of her dress. "I gave her too few choices," the judge continued. "I see that now more clearly than I allowed myself then." Samuel did not answer quickly. Lydia imagined him looking out over the dark yard, where the fields lay quiet under the first bite of approaching winter. "You chose a hard road for her," Samuel said at last, "but you did not choose it carelessly." "No, but fear can dress itself in good intentions." "That is true." The judge drew a long breath. "I need to ask you something plainly. I would rather have an honest answer than a kind one. Do you love my daughter?" Inside, Lydia went still. The room seemed to narrow around her. The fire popped. Margaret and Mrs. Vale murmured in the kitchen, unaware. Danny laughed faintly from the barn, followed by Abram telling him to lower his foolishness before it froze. On the porch, Samuel said nothing. The silence lasted long enough for Lydia's heart to hurt. Then he spoke. "Yes." Only one word. No flourish, no defense, no explanation offered before the truth. Judge Harrow's voice changed. "You are certain?" I am careful with certainty, Samuel said, so yes. Lydia bowed her head over Elia's. The baby slept on, unmoved by the word that had just changed the shape of her life. Samuel continued slower. I did not love her when I married her. I respected her. I pitied what had been done to her, though she did not need pity. I meant to be decent and keep my word. That was all I knew how to offer. And now I look for her in every room before I know I am doing it. I trust her mind with the farm. I trust her heart with this house. I think of the boy as ours before I remember to be cautious with the word. And when I imagine this place without her in it, it stops feeling like home. Lydia's tears fell silently onto Elias' blanket. Her father's voice was unsteady when he answered. Then I was more fortunate than wise. Samuel said, so was I. The next morning after her parents left, Lydia found Samuel in the office. The ledger lay open before him, but he was not reading. A folded paper sat near his hand. When she entered, he rose. You should be resting, he said. You should find a new sentence. That faint smile touched his mouth, then faded. He picked up the paper. Your father left this. What is it? The legal record of your mother's money. It remains yours. He also wrote that if you wished to return to his house for any reason, now or later, he would receive you and Elias without condition. Lydia stared at him. Samuel placed the paper on the desk between them. I told you when we married that if you ever wished to leave, I would not stand in your way. I meant it then. I mean it now. The room grew very quiet. The old Lydia, the one who had entered this house with a valise and a future narrowed by other people's fear, might have heard rejection in those words. She might have thought he was reminding her not to expect too much. But she knew Samuel now. This hurt him to say. That was why he had to say it. Lydia moved to the desk and rested her hand on the ledger. His writing filled one column. Hers filled the next. Between the pages lay the bank extension, the grain contract, Abraham's field notes, Danny's wagon marks, and a small pressed leaf Mrs. Vale had used once to mark a recipe and somehow left among the accounts. This farm owes me nothing, she said. Samuel's face tightened. This house owes me nothing, she continued. You owe me nothing beyond the respect you already gave before I knew what to do with it. Lydia, but I am not staying because I have nowhere else to go. He went still. She looked at him fully. I have somewhere else now. That is what makes the choice real. Samuel's hand rested on the back of the chair. His knuckles whitened slightly. And what do you choose? He asked. Lydia thought of her father's quiet regret, of town whispers that no longer ruled the air she breathed, of Mrs. Vale placing peppermint drops in her pocket, of Danny calling Elia's little captain because the baby commanded the whole house, of Abraham asking whether the east window needed shade, of Samuel walking the floor barefoot at 2 a.m, bargaining with an infant as if love were a duty he was honored to perform. She thought of the first day, when she had walked through the front door as a bargain. Then she looked at the man before her. I choose to stay, she said, but not as your responsibility, not as the woman your kindness rescued. I want to stay as your wife if that is still what you want. Samuel's breath left him slowly. He came around the desk, stopped before her, and held out his hand. Not taking. Asking. Lydia placed her hand in his. It is what I want, he said, more than I know how to ask for properly. You are doing well enough. For the first time, he lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles. The gesture was quiet, almost reverent, and so unlike the cold ceremony that had begun their marriage that Lydia could hardly breathe around it. From the hallway, Elias began to cry. Samuel closed his eyes briefly. Lydia laughed through tears. He has timing, she said. He has opinions. They went to him together. The cradle still stood inconveniently in the hall, forcing every person in the house to step around it. Elias lay inside, red-faced and furious, his small fists waving as if summoning the household to attention. Samuel lifted him first. The crying softened almost at once. Lydia watched the two of them, father and son by every measure that mattered, and understood that the first marriage had given her shelter. This choice had given her home. Spring returned to Whitaker Farm slowly, as if the earth itself needed time to trust warmth again. The snow did not vanish all at once. It pulled back from fence posts first, then from the wagon ruts, then from the south rise where the best wheat had stood before the hail. Mud took its place, deep and stubborn, clinging to boots and wagon wheels and the hems of skirts. Danny complained that spring was only winter after it had lost discipline. Abram told him that was the first sensible thing he had said all year. Inside the house, Elias ruled every room. His cradle still stood in the front hallway. No one admitted responsibility for keeping it there. Mrs. Vale said it was foolish to move a cradle while a baby still used it. Abram said it blocked the path to the door. Danny said the cradle was the path now, and people ought to respect established roads. Samuel struck his shin on it twice in 1 week and still carried it only far enough to sweep beneath it before setting it back in the same inconvenient place. Lydia understood why. The cradle had become more than furniture. It was proof. Proof of nights Samuel had worked in secret before he had dared name what he felt. Proof of the child the household had waited for before he had a name. Proof that a thing built from uncertainty could become the center of a home. Elias liked the cradle least of anyone. He preferred arms, Samuel's most of all, though Mrs. Vale said this was because Samuel allowed himself to be bullied by someone without teeth. Samuel denied it while walking the baby in slow circles before dawn. By late March, the farm had paid another small portion on the note. Not enough to celebrate loudly, but enough for Samuel to return from the bank without that hollow set to his mouth Lydia had come to hate. Wheat prices were still uncertain. Equipment still needed repair. A late frost could still make fools of every plan in the ledger. But the farm had survived winter. More importantly, it had learned how to survive together. Lydia kept the accounts now as naturally as Mrs. Vale kept the pantry. No one asked whether she should see a bill or a receipt. Abram brought field tallies directly to her desk, sometimes with corrections already written, because he had learned how she wanted them marked. Danny delivered messages from town and waited for her answer before assuming Samuel's would be the only one that mattered. Samuel still made final decisions where the farm required it, but he made them with Lydia beside him more often than not. One evening in April, after Elias had finally surrendered to sleep and the house had gone soft with lamplight, Samuel set a small paper on the office desk. Lydia looked up from the seed order. "What is that?" "A question. That is not usually how paper works." His mouth curved. "This one does." She unfolded it. It was not a legal document, not a banknote, not a contract or receipt. It was a list. Reverend Tabor, Judge and Mrs. Harrow, Mrs. Vale, Abram Pike, Danny Bell, the Millers from the neighboring farm, Mrs. Calder, a few names from town Lydia had not expected to see. People who had offered kindness without making a performance of it. The postmaster's wife, who had quietly brought thread after Elias was born. Old Mr. Keene from the livery, who had given Samuel a good hauling rate after the harvest without calling it charity. Reverend Tabor, who had spoken her vows the first time, and would understand better than most why vows might need a day warmed by choice. Lydia read the names twice. Her throat tightened before she spoke. "For what?" Samuel stood beside the desk, one hand resting on the chair back. He looked almost as nervous as he had on the morning her father brought her to the farm. "You never had a wedding that belonged to you," he said. "We had a paper, we had witnesses, we had a bargain no one knew how to dress kindly." She set the list down carefully. "We are married, Lydia. That is not in question. But if you would like a day that remembers what we became instead of only what we were forced to begin, I would like to give you one." She looked at him for a long moment. Once a proposal had been made over her future as if she were a problem to be solved before town gossip found its voice. This was different. Samuel was not asking to shelter her, not asking to repair her name, not asking because the farm needed funds or the bank needed proof or her father needed peace. He was asking because he wanted her to have joy without apology. "What kind of day?" she asked softly. "Small here after planting, no fine show unless you want one." "I do not need fine." "I know, but needing and wanting are not enemies." That was when she cried. Not loudly, not with grief. The tears simply rose and slipped free before she could command them back. Samuel moved at once, then stopped, still asking even after all these months. Lydia reached for him. He came around the desk, and she rested her forehead against his chest. His arms closed around her, careful at first, then certain when she leaned fully into him. "Yes," she whispered, "I would like that day." Samuel bowed his head over hers. From the hallway, Elias gave a sudden sharp cry. They both froze. Then Lydia laughed against Samuel's shirt. "He approves. He objects to being left off the list. He cannot sign yet. He would if he could grip the pen." The day was set for the last Sunday in May, after the new wheat had gone into the ground. The planting season came hard but hopeful. Samuel and Abram worked the fields from dawn until the light thinned. Danny drove team, hauled seed, broke one handle, repaired it badly, and had it repaired properly by Abram with a lecture attached. Lydia kept the planting accounts at the porch table on warm afternoons with Elias sleeping in a basket beside her, one small fist curled near his cheek. Mrs. Vale brought lemonade and declared that numbers looked less threatening outdoors. Judge Harrow came twice before the ceremony. The first time, he came for Elias and pretended otherwise. The second time, he came to ask Lydia whether she wanted him to stand with her. He found her in the parlor folding the little white gown Mrs. Vale had insisted Elias wear for the ceremony, though Elias had no opinion on clothing beyond resentment. Her father stood near the fireplace, hat turning slowly in his hands. "I know I stood too much over your first wedding," he said. Lydia looked at him gently. "You were trying to keep me from falling. I was also trying to keep myself from shame." "Yes." He accepted the word with a nod. It no longer needed to wound him before it could teach him. "I would like to stand with you this time," he said, "not to give you away. I have learned the cost of thinking daughters are handed from one man's keeping to another." Lydia's hands stilled on the baby gown. "What would you stand for then?" His eyes shone, though he did not look away, "to witness that you chose for yourself." Lydia crossed the room and put her arms around him. For the first time since the day she had come home carrying fear beneath her heart, her father held her without trying to solve her life. On the morning of the ceremony, the farm woke bright. The sky was clean blue, washed by rain 2 days before. The wheat had begun to show in thin green lines across the fields, tender but determined. Mrs. Vale had been awake since before dawn, cooking enough food for a town twice the size of Mercy Ridge while claiming there would hardly be enough. Danny polished the wagon harness, though no one had asked him to. Abram put on a clean shirt and threatened the boy with silence if he mentioned it. Lydia wore a cream dress with small blue flowers at the cuffs. It was not new. Mrs. Vale had altered it to fit her after the baby, letting out one seam, taking in another, and adding a ribbon at the waist because, as she said, a woman deserved at least one thing that served no purpose but beauty. Samuel wore his black coat again. This time, the cuff was mended so neatly Lydia knew Mrs. Vale had not done it. She had. Elias wore the white gown for exactly 20 minutes before spitting milk on it. Mrs. Vale declared the stain proof of good health and refused to change him. The ceremony took place in the yard between the farmhouse and the newly planted field. There were flowers this time, though not many, wild daisies in jars, cottonwood branches tied with twine, a clean white cloth laid over the porch table where Mrs. Vale had set pies beneath linen. The guests stood in a loose half-circle, not large enough to feel like spectacle, but warm enough that Lydia did not feel hidden. Reverend Tabor stood before them with his silver spectacles low on his nose. Judge Harrow stood beside Lydia for the first few moments, Elias in his arms. His face was solemn, but when the baby grabbed at his collar, his mouth trembled into a smile. Then Lydia stepped forward alone. Not because no one loved her. Because she could. Samuel watched her come with an expression she would remember longer than any words spoken that day. His eyes did not hold pity, duty, or careful restraint. They held welcome. She stopped before him. Reverend Tabor opened his worn Bible, but he did not begin with law. Some promises are spoken before the heart knows how to keep them, he said. And some are spoken later, after days of work have taught the heart what the words mean. Lydia looked at Samuel. His hand waited between them. She took it. The Reverend asked if they wished to speak for themselves. Samuel had warned Lydia that he was not a man for fine speeches. She had told him she did not require fine. He proved it. When you first came here, Samuel said, voice low but steady, I thought I was making room for you because honor required it. I did not know you would make room in me. Lydia's fingers tightened around his. I promised you safety. I still promise that. I promised fairness. I still promise that too. But today I can promise more without lying. I love you. I love the life we are building. I love the boy who wakes the house like a rooster with worse manners. I want you here not because of a bargain, not because of debt, not because anyone expects it, but because this is home when you are in it. Mrs. Vale pressed a handkerchief to her eyes. Danny stared at the ground with great determination. Abram looked toward the field as if wheat growth required his immediate attention. Lydia drew a breath. The first wedding had taken her voice and left her with courage alone. This one gave both back. I came here afraid I would be tolerated, she said. I thought shelter was the most I could ask from life. You gave me respect before affection. You gave me truth before comfort. You gave my child kindness before anyone had the right to expect love. And then, day by day, you gave us your heart. Samuel's face changed. I choose you, Lydia said. Not because I have nowhere to go, not because my name needs yours to stand, not because this farm needs my hands in the ledger. I choose you because I love the man who keeps his promises, who gets up when Elias cries, who lets a woman stand beside him instead of behind him, and who built a cradle before he knew what hope was asking of him. A small sound broke from Mrs. Vale. This time, no one pretended not to hear. Reverend Tabor smiled and spoke a blessing over them. There was no need to marry them again, yet something was joined more surely in that yard than it had been in the front room a year before. When Samuel kissed Lydia, it was gentle, brief, and full of everything they had taken months to earn. Danny whooped so loudly one of the horses answered from the barn. Abram cuffed him lightly on the shoulder, then clapped longer than anyone. Mrs. Vale kissed Lydia's cheek and Samuel's too, leaving flour on his coat. Judge Harrow held Elias and cried openly enough that Margaret took his hand instead of pretending not to notice. Afterward, they ate beneath the cottonwood. There was chicken, potatoes, beans, biscuits, 3 pies, and the preserved pears Margaret had brought. Danny gave a toast that began well and wandered badly until Abram told him to sit before the baby learned poor habits. Mrs. Vale fed everyone twice and called it once. Reverend Tabor laughed with Judge Harrow near the fence. Neighbors who had once spoken carefully around Lydia now spoke to her about recipes, wheat, babies, weather, and the price of flour. Not all judgment had vanished from the world. It never did. But it no longer had a chair at her table. Near evening, when the guests had begun to leave and the yard glowed gold, Lydia found herself standing at the edge of the new field with Elias in her arms. The first green shoots lined the soil in careful rows. Behind her, the house was loud with dishes, laughter, and Danny being accused of stealing the last piece of pie. The cradle had been carried outside for the day and sat near the porch, pale pine catching the last light, its carved wheat heads glowing softly. Samuel came to stand beside her. For a while, neither spoke. Elias slept against Lydia's shoulder, one fist closed around a loose strand of her hair. Samuel reached carefully and freed it, his rough fingers gentle. "The field looks good," Lydia said. "It does. Still early." "Yes. Still much could happen." Samuel looked from the field to her. "Yes." She smiled. "You are supposed to say something comforting." "I have learned not to argue with weather in advance." "That is not comforting." "No, but I will be here when it comes." Lydia leaned her shoulder against his arm. This time, neither of them moved away. Across the yard, Abram tried to lift the cradle and carry it back inside. Danny grabbed the other end, and the two of them immediately disagreed about angled doorway and whether babies cared about being level. Mrs. Vale stepped onto the porch and ordered both of them to stop treating furniture like cattle. Samuel watched them with quiet amusement. "We could move it out of the hallway," he said. Lydia looked at the cradle, then at the house, then at the people gathered around the object none of them wanted to stop stumbling over. "No," she said, "leave it where everyone has to remember he is there." Samuel's smile came slow and warm. Judge Harrow approached before leaving, hat in hand once more, but not like the first day. That morning last year, his hat had been a shield for shame. Today it was only a hat. He looked at Lydia, then Samuel, then the sleeping baby. "I thought I was arranging a mercy," he said quietly. "I did not understand I was watching a family begin." Lydia took her father's hand. Samuel placed one hand lightly on Elia's back. The four of them stood together at the edge of the field, with the house behind them and the new wheat before them, and nothing about it felt arranged anymore. Later, long after the last wagon had gone and the dishes were stacked and Elia's had been laid in the cradle he would soon complain about, Lydia and Samuel sat on the porch steps. The night smelled of turned soil and cooling grass. A lantern burned in the hallway, spilling light across the cradle's curved rail. Samuel took Lydia's hand. She let her head rest against his shoulder. Their first marriage had been made from fear, debt, and necessity. It had given her a name, a roof, and time enough to breathe. But this second promise, spoken with the freedom to walk away and the courage to stay, gave them something stronger than rescue. It gave them choice. And in the years that followed, whenever people asked how Whitaker Farm survived the hail year, the bank note, and a marriage begun without love, Lydia would smile toward the field. Samuel would glance at the cradle long since moved but never forgotten, and neither would tell the story as if one person had saved the rest. Because the truth was better. A frightened woman crossed a threshold. A burdened man kept his word. A stern foreman learned respect. A housekeeper made room. A lonely boy became a brother. A child arrived innocent and loved. And somewhere between ledgers, wheat, midnight crying, and hands held carefully before they were held freely, necessity became home. Their first promise was made because life left them little choice. Their real promise came later, when both of them finally had the freedom to leave and chose instead to stay.